that's what I call time well spent. So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent? So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent? You took all this time thinking you'd be playing on my mind like you should be. You know when you miss me, I'm hard to find. So when you are with me, love me blind. I could be somewhere else, but I'd rather be with you. And that's what I call time well spent. So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent? So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent? So what do you call it when you're with me? Oh, is it time well spent? So what do you call it when you're with me? Is it time well spent?
I still remember how it used to be, holding hands, running wild and free. Crossed our hearts, said we never let go. I still think about our younger days, how we dreamed about a better life, holding you so close to me, in the backseat of your ride. We fell apart, thought we lost everything, just lost in our memories. And I sure hope you do remember me like I remember you. We drew our names in the pavement, thinking about how we never change. I still remember how it used to be. I still think about our younger days, how we dreamed about a better life, holding you so close to me, in the backseat of your ride. We fell apart, thought we lost everything, just lost in our memories. And I sure hope you do remember me like I remember you.
And I don't have expectations, but when I daydream, I fall asleep, and our hands melt. It started out as teasing, but I had deeper meaning when I touched your chest. Now I don't know how, but if I did. And I don't have any wishes, but when I kiss our lips feel warm. And I don't have expectations, but when I daydream, I fall asleep, and our hands melt. But if I did all along, and I don't.
All right, and now we are on to our stream. It's good to see you, Apple. I hope that we are all ready for more Lord of the Rings. I shouldn't say it like that because I do like the book. It is some good reading. I just feel like I'm never going to get through this poor book because it's so long. So, on to our story. Book 2, Chapter 1. Many meetings. Frodo woke and found himself lying in bed. At first he thought that he had slept late after a long unpleasant dream that still hovered on the edge of memory. Or perhaps he had been ill. But the ceiling looked strange. It was flat, and it had dark beams richly carved. He lay a little while longer, looking at patches of sunlight on the wall, and listening to the sound of a waterfall. "Where am I, and what is the time?" he said aloud to the ceiling. "In the house of Elrond, and it is 10 o'clock in the morning," said a voice. "It is the morning of October the 24th, if you want to know." "Gandalf!" cried Frodo, sitting up. There was the old wizard, sitting in a chair by the open window. "Yes," he said, "I am here. And you were lucky to be here too, after all the absurd things you have done since you left home." Frodo lay down again. He felt too comfortable and peaceful to argue, and in any case he did not think he would get the better of an argument. He was fully awake now, and the memory of his journey was returning. The disastrous shortcut through the old forest, the accident at the Prancing Pony, and his madness in putting on the ring in the dell under Weathertop. While he was thinking of all these things and trying in vain to bring his memory down to his arriving in Rivendell, there was a long silence, broken only by the soft puffs of Gandalf's pipe, as he blew white smoke rings out of the window. "Where's Sam?" Frodo asked at length. "And are the others all right?" "Yes, they are all safe and sound," answered Gandalf. "Sam was here until I sent him off to get some rest about half an hour ago." "What happened at the ford?" said Frodo. "It all seemed so dim, somehow, and it still does." "Yes, it would. You were beginning to fade," answered Gandalf. "The wound was overcoming you at last. A few more hours, and you would have been beyond our aid. But you have some strength in you now, dear Hobbit, as you showed in the barrow. That was touch and go, perhaps the most dangerous moment of all. I wish you could have held out at Weathertop." "You seem to know a great deal already," said Frodo. "I have not spoken to the others about the barrow. At first it was too horrible, and afterwards there were other things to think about. How do you know about it?" "You have talked long in your sleep, Frodo," said Gandalf gently. "And it has not been hard for me to read your mind and memory. Do not worry, though. I said absurd just now. I did not mean it. I think well of you, and of the others. It is no small feat to have come so far and through such dangers, still bearing the ring." "We should never have done it without Strider," said Frodo. "But we needed you. I did not know what to do without you." "I was delayed," said Gandalf, "and that nearly proved our ruin. And yet I am not sure. It may have been better so." "I wish... Tell me what happened." "All in good time. You were not supposed to talk or worry about anything today, by Elrond's orders. But talking would stop me thinking and wondering, which are quite as tiring," said Frodo. "I am wide awake now, and I remember so many things that want explaining. Why were you delayed? You ought to tell me that, at least." "You will soon hear all you wish to know," said Gandalf. "We shall have a council as soon as you are well enough. At the moment, I will only say that I was held captive." "You?" cried Frodo. "Yes, I, Gandalf the Grey," said the wizard solemnly. "There are many powers in the world, for good or for evil. Some are greater than I am. Against some I have not yet been measured. But my time is coming. The Morgul Lord and his black riders have come forth. War is preparing." "Then you knew of the riders already, before I met them?" "Yes, I knew of them. Indeed, I spoke of them once to you, for the Black Riders are the Ringwraiths, the 9 servants of the Lord of the Rings. But I did not know that they had arisen again, or I should have fled with you at once. I heard news of them only after I left you in June, but that story must wait. For the moment we have been saved from disaster by Aragorn." "Yes," said Frodo. "It was Strider that saved us. Yet I was afraid of him at first. Sam never quite trusted him, I think. Not at any rate until we met Glorfindel." Gandalf smiled. "I have heard all about Sam," he said. "He has no more doubts now." "I am glad," said Frodo, "for I have become very fond of Strider. Well, fond is not the right word. I mean, he is dear to me, though he is strange and grim at times. In fact, he reminds me often of you. I didn't know that any of the big people were like that. I thought, well, that they were just big and rather stupid. Kind and stupid like Butterbur, or stupid and wicked like Bill Ferny. But then we don't know much about men in the Shire, except perhaps the Brelanders." "You don't know much even about them if you think old Barlaman is stupid," said Gandalf. "He is wise enough on his own ground. He thinks less than he talks, and slower, yet he can see through a brick wall in time, as they say in Bree. But there are few left in Middle-earth like Aragorn, son of Arathorn. The race of the kings from over the sea is nearly at end. It may be that this War of the Ring will be their last adventure." "Do you really mean that Strider is one of the people of the old kings?" said Frodo in wonder. "I thought they had all vanished long ago." I thought he was only a ranger." "Only a ranger?" cried Gandalf. "My dear Frodo, that is just what the rangers are. The last remnant in the north of the great people, the men of the west. They have helped me before, and I shall need their help in the days to come. For we have reached Rivendell, but the ring is not yet at rest." "I suppose not," said Frodo. "But so far my only thought has been to get here, and I hope I shan't have to go any further. It is very pleasant just to rest. I have had a month of exile and adventure, and I find that has been as much as I want." He fell silent and shut his eyes. After a while he spoke again. "I have been reckoning," he said, "and I can't bring the total up to October the 24th. It ought to be the 21st. We must have reached the ford by the 20th. "You have talked and reckoned more than is good for you," said Gandalf. "How do the side and shoulder feel now?" "I don't know," Frodo answered. "They don't feel at all, which is an improvement, but—" He made an effort. "I can move my arm again a little. Yes, it is coming back to life. It is not cold," he added, touching his left hand with his right. "Good," said Gandalf. "It is mending fast. You will soon be sound again. Elrond has cured you. He has tended you for days, ever since you were brought in." "Days?" said Frodo. "Well, 4 nights and 3 days, to be exact. The elves brought you from the ford on the night of the 20th, and that is where you lost count. We have been terribly anxious, and Sam has hardly left your side, day or night, except to run messages. Elrond is a master of healing, but the weapons of our enemy are deadly. To tell you the truth, I had very little hope, for I suspected that there was some fragment of the blade still in the closed wound, but it could not be found until last night. Then Elrond removed a splinter. It was deeply buried, and it was working inwards." Frodo shuddered, remembering the cruel knife with notched blade that had vanished in Strider's hands. "Don't be alarmed," said Gandalf. "It is gone now. It has been melted. And it seems that hobbits fade very reluctantly. I have known strong warriors of the big people who would quickly have been overcome by that splinter which you bore for 17 days. "What would they have done to me?" asked Frodo. "What were the riders trying to do?" "They tried to pierce your heart with a Morgul knife which remains in the wound. If they had succeeded, you would have become like they are, only weaker and under their command. You would have become a wraith under the dominion of the Dark Lord, and he would have tormented you for trying to keep his ring, if any greater torment were possible than being robbed of it and seeing it on his hand." "Thank goodness I did not realize the horrible danger," said Frodo faintly. "I was mortally afraid, of course, but if I had known more, I should have dared even move. It is a marvel that I escaped." "Yes, fortune or fate have helped you," said Gandalf, "not to mention courage, for your heart was not touched, and only your shoulder was pierced, and that was because you resisted to the last. But it was a terribly narrow shave, so to speak. You were in greatest peril while you wore the ring, for then you were half in the wraith world yourself, and they might have seized you. You could see them, and they could see you." "I know," said Frodo. "They were terrible to behold. But why could we all see their horses?" "Because they are real horses, just as the black robes are real robes that they wear to give shape to their nothingness when they have dealings with the living." "Then why do these black horses endure such riders? All other animals are terrified when they draw near, even the elf horse of Glorfindel. The dogs howl and the geese scream at them." "Because these horses are born and bred to the service of the Dark Lord in Mordor. Not all his servants and chattel are wraiths. There are orcs and trolls, there are wargs and werewolves, and there have been and still are many men, warriors and kings, that walk alive under the sun and yet are under his sway, and their number is growing daily." "What about Rivendell and the elves? Is Rivendell safe?" "Yes, at present, until all else is conquered. The elves may fear the Dark Lord, and they may fly before him, but never again will they listen to him or serve him. And here in Rivendell there live still some of his chief foes, the Elven Wise, lords of the Eldar from beyond the furthest seas. They do not fear the ring-wraiths, for those who have dwelt in the blessed realms live at once in both worlds, and against both the seen and the unseen they have great power. I thought that I saw a white figure that shone and did not grow dim like the others. Was that Glorfindel then? Yes, you saw him for a moment as he is upon the other side, one of the mighty of the firstborn. He is an elf lord of a house of princes. Indeed, there is power in Rivendell to withstand the might of Mordor for a while, and elsewhere other powers still dwell. There is power, too, of another kind in the Shire, but all such places will soon become islands under siege if things go on as they are going. The Dark Lord is putting forth all his strength. Still, he said, standing suddenly and sticking out his chin, while his beard went stiff and straight like bristling wire, we must keep up our courage. You will soon be well, if I do not talk you to death. You are in Rivendell, and you need not worry about anything for the present. I haven't any courage to keep up, said Frodo. But I am not worried at the moment. Just give me news of my friends, and tell me the end of the affairs at the ford, for as I shall keep on asking, and I shall be content for the present. After that I shall have another sleep, I think, but I shan't be able to close my eyes until you've finished the story for me. Gandalf moved his chair to the bedside, and took a good look at Frodo. The color had come back to his face, and his eyes were clear, and fully awake and aware. He was smiling, and there seemed to be little wrong with him. But to the wizard's eye there was a faint change, just a hint, as if were of transparency, about him, and especially about the left hand that lay outside upon the coverlet. Still, that must be expected, said Gandalf to himself. He is not half through yet, and to what he will come in the end, not even Elrond can foretell. Not to evil, I think. He may become like a glass filled with a clear light for eyes to see that can. You look splendid, he said aloud. I will risk a brief tale upon consulting Elrond, but quite brief, mind you, and then you must sleep again. This is what happened, as far as I can gather. The riders made straight for you as soon as you fled. They did not need the guidance of their horses any longer. You would become visible to them, being already on the threshold of their world, and also the ring drew them. Your friends sprang aside off the road, or they would have been ridden down. They knew that nothing could save you if the white horse could not. The riders were too swift to overtake and too many to oppose. On foot, even Glorfindel and Aragorn together could not withstand all the 9 at once. When the ring-wraiths swept by, your friends ran up behind. Close to the ford, there is a small hollow behind the road, masked by a few stunted trees. There they hastily kindled fire, for Glorfindel knew that a flood would come down if the riders tried to cross, and then he would have to deal with any that were left on his side of the river. The moment the flood appeared, he rushed out, followed by Aragorn and the others with flaming brands. Caught between fire and water, and seeing an elf lord revealed in his wraith, they were dismayed, and their horses were stricken with madness. 3 were carried away by the first assault of the flood. The others were now hurled into the water by their horses and overwhelmed. And is that the end of the Black Riders? Asked Frodo. No, said Gandalf. Their horses must have perished, and without them they are crippled, but the ring-wraiths themselves cannot be so easily destroyed. However, there is nothing more to fear from them at present. Your friends crossed after the flood had passed, and they found you lying on your face at the top of the bank, with a broken sword under you. The horse was standing guard beside you. You were pale and cold, and they feared that you were dead, or worse. Elrond's folks met them, carrying you slowly toward Rivendell. Who made the flood? Asked Frodo. Elrond commanded it, answered Gandalf. The river of this valley is under his power, and it will rise in anger when he has great need to bar the ford. As soon as the captain of the ring wraiths rode into the water, the flood was released. If I may say so, I added a few touches of my own. You may not have noticed, but some of the waves took the form of great white horses with shining white riders, and there were many rolling and grinding boulders. For a moment I was afraid that we had let loose too fierce a wrath, and the flood would get out of hand and wash you all away. There is great vigor in the waters that come down from the snows of the misty mountains. Yes, it all comes back to me now, said Frodo. The tremendous roaring. I thought I was drowning, and my friends and enemies and all, but now we are safe. Gandalf looked quickly at Frodo, but he had shut his eyes. Yes, you are all safe for the present. Soon there will be feasting and merrymaking to celebrate the victory at the ford of Bruinen, and you will all be there in places of honor. Splendid, said Frodo. It is wonderful that Elrond and Glorfindel and such great lords, not to mention Strider, should take so much trouble and show me so much kindness. Well, there are many reasons why they should, said Gandalf, smiling. I am one good reason. The ring is another. You are the ring-bearer, and you are the heir of Bilbo, the ring-finder. Dear Bilbo, said Frodo sleepily. I wonder where he is. I wish he was here and could hear all about it. It would have made him laugh. The cow jumped over the moon, and the poor old troll. With that, he fell fast asleep. Frodo was now safe in the last homely house east of the sea. The home was, as Bilbo had long ago reported, a perfect house, whether you like food or sleep or storytelling or singing or just sitting and thinking, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Merely to be there was a cure for weariness, fear, and sadness. As the evening drew on, Frodo woke up again, and he found that he no longer felt in need of rest or sleep, but had a mind for food and drink, and probably for singing or storytelling afterwards. He got out of bed and discovered that his arm was already nearly as useful again as it had ever been. He found laid ready clean garments of green cloth that fitted him excellently. Looking in a mirror, he was startled to see a much thinner reflection of himself than he remembered. It looked remarkably like the young nephew of Bilbo who used to go tramping with his uncle in the Shire, but the eyes looked out at him thoughtfully. Yes, you have seen a thing or two since you last peeped out of a looking-glass, he said to his reflection. But now for a merry meeting. He stretched out his arms and whistled a tune. At that moment there was a knock on the door, and Sam came in. He ran to Frodo and took his left hand, awkwardly and shyly. He stroked it gently, and then he blushed and turned hastily away. "Hello, Sam," said Frodo. "It's warm," said Sam, "meaning your hand, Mr. Frodo. It has felt so cold through the long nights. But glory and trumpets," he cried, turning round again with shining eyes and dancing on the floor. "It's fine to see you up and yourself again, sir. Gandalf asked me to come and see if you were ready to come down, and I thought he was joking." "I am ready," said Frodo. "Let's go and look for the rest of the party." "I can take you to them, sir," said Sam. "It's a big house, this, and very peculiar. Always a bit more to discover, and no knowing what you'll find round a corner. And elves, sir. Elves here and elves there. Some like kings, terrible and splendid, and some as merry as children. And the music and the singing we got here. But I'm getting to know some of the ways of the place." "I know what you've been doing, Sam," said Frodo, taking his arm. "But you shall be merry tonight and listen to your heart's content. Come on, guide me around the corners." Sam led him along several passages and down many steps and out into a high garden above the steep bank of the river. He found his friends sitting in a porch on the side of the house looking east. Shadows had fallen in the valley below, but there was still a light on the faces of the mountains far below. The air was warm, the sound of running and falling water was loud, and the evening was filled with a faint scent of trees and flowers, as if summer still lingered in Elrond's gardens. "Hooray!" cried Pippin, springing up. "Here is our noble cousin. Make way for Frodo, Lord of the Ring." "Hush," said Gandalf from the shadows at the back of his porch. Evil things do not come into this valley, but all the same we should not name them. The Lord of the Ring is not Frodo, but the master of the Dark Tower of Mordor, whose power is again stretching out over the world. We are sitting in a fortress. Outside it is getting dark. Gandalf has been saying many cheerful things like that, said Pippin. He thinks I need keeping in order, but it seems impossible somehow to feel gloomy or depressed in this place. I feel I could sing if I knew the right song for the occasion. I feel like singing myself, laughed Frodo, though at the moment I feel more like eating and drinking. That soon will be cured, said Pippin. You've shown your usual cunning in getting up just in time for a meal. More than a meal, a feast, said Merry. As soon as Gandalf reported that you were recovered, the preparations began. He had hardly finished speaking when they were summoned to the hall by the ringing of many bells. The hall of Elrond's house was filled with folk. Elves for the most part, though there were a few guests of other sorts. Elrond, as was his custom, sat in a great chair at the end of the long table upon the dais, and next to him on the one side sat Glorfindel. On the other side sat Gandalf. Frodo looked at them in wonder, for he had never before seen Elrond, of whom so many tales spoke, and as they sat upon his right hand and his left, Glorfindel and even Gandalf, whom he thought he knew so well, were revealed as lords of dignity and power. Gandalf was shorter in stature than the other two, but his long white hair, his sweeping silver beard, and his broad shoulders made him look like some wise king of ancient legend. His aged face under great snowy brows, his dark eyes were set like coal that could leap suddenly into fire. Glorfindel was tall and straight. His hair was of shining gold, his face fair and young and fearless and full of joy. His eyes were bright and keen, and his voice like music. On his brow sat wisdom, and in his hand was strength. The face of Elrond was ageless, neither old nor young, though in it was written the memory of many things, both glad and sorrowful. His hair was dark as the shadows of twilight, and upon it sat a circlet of silver. His eyes were gray as a clear evening, and in them was a light like the light of stars. Venerable he seemed as a king crowned with many winters, and yet hale as he tried, warrior in the fullness of his strength. He was the Lord of Rivendell, and mighty among both elves and men. In the middle of the table, against the woven cloths upon the wall, there was a chair under a canopy, and there sat a lady fair to look upon, and so like was she in form to womanhood to Elrond, that Frodo guessed that she was one of his close kindred. Young she was, and yet not so. The braids of her dark hair were touched by no frost. Her white arms and clear face were flawless and smooth, and the light of stars was in her bright eyes, gray as a cloudless night. Yet queenly she looked, and thought and knowledge were in her glance, as of one who has known many things that the years bring. Above her brow her hair was covered with a cap of silver lace, netted with small gems, glittering white, but in her soft gray raiment had no ornament save a girdle of leaves wrought in silver. So it was that Frodo saw her whom few mortals had yet seen, Arwen, daughter of Elrond, in whom it was said that the likeness of Luthien had come on earth again, and she was called Andomiel, for she was the even star of her people. Long she had been in the land of her mother's kin in Lorien beyond the mountains, and was but lately returned to Rivendell to her father's house. But her brothers Eladan and Elrohir were out upon errantry, for they rode often far afield with the rangers of the north, forgetting never their mother's torment in the dens of the orcs. Such loveliness in living thing Frodo had never seen before nor imagined in his mind, and he was both surprised and abashed to find that he had a seat at Elrond's table among all these folk so high and fair. Though he had a suitable chair and was raised upon several cushions, he felt very small and rather out of place. But that feeling quickly passed. The feast was merry, and the food all that his hunger could desire. It was some time before he looked about him again or even turned to his neighbors. He looked first for his friends. Sam had begged to be allowed to wait on his master, but had been told that for the time he was a guest of honor. Frodo could see him now, sitting with Pippin and Merry at the upper end of one of the side tables close to the dais. He could see no sign of Strider. Next to Frodo, on his right, sat a dwarf of important appearance, richly dressed. His beard, very long and forked, was white, nearly as white as the snow-white cloth of his garments. He wore a silver belt, and round his neck hung a chain of silver and diamonds. Frodo stopped eating to look at him. "Welcome, and well met," said the dwarf, turning towards him. Then he actually rose from his seat and bowed. "Glóin, at your service," he said, and bowed still lower. "Frodo Baggins, at your service and your family's," said Frodo correctly, rising in surprise and scattering his cushions. "Am I right in guessing that you are the Glóin, one of the 12 companions of the great Thorin Oakenshield?" "Quite right," answered the dwarf, gathering up the cushions and courteously assisting Frodo back into his seat. "And I do not ask, for I have already been told that you are the kinsman and adopted heir of our friend Bilbo the Renowned. Allow me to congratulate you on your recovery." "Thank you very much," said Frodo. "You have had some very strange adventures, I hear," said Glóin. "I wonder greatly what brings 4 hobbits on such a long journey. Nothing like it has happened since Bilbo came with us. But perhaps I should not inquire too closely, since Elrond and Gandalf do not seem disposed to talk of this." "I think we will not speak of it, at least not yet," said Frodo politely. He guessed that even in Elrond's house the matter of the ring was not one for casual talk, and in any case he wished to forget his troubles for a time. "But I am equally curious," he added, "to learn what brings so important a dwarf so far from the lonely mountain." Glóin looked at him. "If you have not heard, I think we will not speak yet on that either. Master Elrond will summon us all ere long, I believe, and then we shall all hear many things, but there is much else that may be told." Throughout the rest of the meal they talked together, but Frodo listened more than he spoke, for the news of the Shire, apart from the ring, seemed small and far away and unimportant, while Glóin had much to tell of events in the northern regions of Wilderland. Frodo learned that Grim Beorn the Old, son of Beorn, was now the lord of many sturdy men, and to their land between the mountains and Mirkwood neither orc nor wolf dared go. "Indeed," said Glóin, "if it were not for the Beornings, the passage from Dale to Rivendell would long ago have become impossible. They are valiant men, and keep open the high pass and the ford of Carrick. But their tolls are high," he added with a shake of his head, "and like Beorn of old, they are not over fond of dwarves. Still, they are trusty, and that is much in these days. Nowhere are there any men so friendly to us as the men of Dale. They are good folk, the Bardings. The grandson of Bard the Bowman rules them, Bard, son of Bane, son of Bard. He is a strong king, and his realm now reaches far south and east of Esgaroth." "And what of your own people?" asked Frodo. "There is much to tell, good and bad," said Glóin, "yet it is mostly good. We have so far been fortunate that we do not escape the shadow of these times. If you really wish to hear of us, I will tell you tidings gladly, but stop me when you are weary. Dwarves' tongues run on when speaking of their handiwork, they say." And with that, Glóin embarked on a long account of the doings of the dwarf kingdom. He was delighted to have found so polite a listener, for Frodo showed no sign of weariness and made no attempt to change the subject, though actually he soon got rather lost among the strange names of people and places that he had never heard of before. He was interested, however, to hear that Dain was still king under the mountain, and was now old, having passed his 250th year, venerable and fabulously rich. Of the 10 companions who had survived the Battle of 5 Armies, 7 were still with him: Dwalin, Gloin, Dory, Nori, Bifer, Bofer, and Bomber. Bomber was now so fat that he could not move himself from his couch to his chair at table, and it took 6 young dwarfs to lift him. "And what has become of Balin and Ori and Oyen?" asked Frodo. A shadow passed over Gloin's face. "We do not know," he answered. "It is largely on account of Balin that I have come to ask the advice of these that dwell in Rivendell. But tonight let us speak of merrier things." Gloin began to talk of the works of his people, telling Frodo about their great labors in Dale and under the mountain. "We have done well," he said, "but in metalwork we cannot rival our fathers, many of whose secrets are lost. We make good armor and keen swords, but we cannot again make mail or blade to match those that were made before the Dragon King. Only in mining and building have we surpassed the old days. You should see the waterways of Dale, Frodo, and the fountains and the pools. You should see the stone-paved roads of many colors, and the halls and cavernous streets under the earth with arches carved like trees, and the terraces and towers upon the mountain's sides. Then you would see that we have not been idle." "I will come and see them if ever I can," said Frodo. How surprised Bilbo would have been to see all the changes in the desolation of Smaug. Gloin looked at Frodo and smiled. "You were very fond of Bilbo, were you not?" he asked. "Yes," answered Frodo. "I would rather see him than all the towers and palaces in the world." At last, the feast came to an end. Elrond and Arwen rose and went down the hall, and the company followed them in due order. The doors were thrown open, and they went across a wide passage and through other doors and came into a great hall. In it were no tables, but a bright fire was burning in a great hearth between the carven pillars upon either side. Frodo found himself walking with Gandalf. "This is the Hall of Fire," said the wizard. "Here you will hear many songs and tales, if you can keep awake. But except on high days, it usually stands empty and quiet, and people come here who wish for peace and thought. There is always a fire here, all year round, but there is little other light." As Elrond entered and went towards the seat prepared for him, elvish minstrels began to make sweet music. Slowly the hall filled, and Frodo looked with delight upon the many fair faces that were gathered together. The golden firelight played upon them and shimmered in their hair. Suddenly he noticed, not far from the further end of the fire, a small dark figure seated on a stool with his back propped against a pillar. Beside him on the ground was a drinking cup and some bread. Frodo wondered whether he was ill, if people were ever ill in Rivendell, and had been unable to come to the feast. His head seemed sunk in sleep on his breast, and a fold of his dark cloak was drawn over his face. Elrond went forward and stood beside the silent figure. "Awaken, little master," he said with a smile. Then turning to Frodo, he beckoned to him. "Now at last the hour has come that you have wished for, Frodo," he said. "Here is a friend that you have long missed." The dark figure raised its head and uncovered its face. "Bilbo!" cried Frodo, with sudden recognition, and he sprang forward. "Hullo, Frodo, my lad," said Bilbo. "So you have got here at last. I hoped you would manage it. Well, well, so all this feasting is in your honor, I hear. I hope you enjoyed yourself." "Why weren't you there?" cried Frodo. "And why haven't I been allowed to see you before?" "Because you were asleep. I have seen a good deal of you. I have sat by your side with Sam each day. But as for the feast, I don't go in for such things much now, and I had something else to do." "What were you doing?" "Why, sitting and thinking." I do a lot of that nowadays, and this is the best place to do it, as a rule. Wake up indeed, he said, cocking an eye at Elrond. There was a bright twinkle in it, and no sign of sleepiness that Frodo could see. Wake up. I was not asleep, Master Elrond. If you want to know, you have all come out from your feast too soon, and you have disturbed me, in the middle of making up a song. I was stuck over a line or two and was thinking about them, but now I don't suppose I shall ever get them right. There will be a great deal of singing with the ideas will be driven clean out of my head. I shall have to get my friend the Dunedain to help me. Where is he? Elrond laughed. He shall be found, he said. Then you two shall go into a corner and finish your task, and we will hear it and judge it before we end the merrymaking. Messengers were sent to find Bilbo's friend, though none knew where he was or why he had not been present at the feast. In the meanwhile, Frodo and Bilbo sat side by side, and Sam came quickly and placed himself near them. They talked together in soft voices, oblivious of the mirth and music in the hall about them. Bilbo had not much to say of himself. When he had left Hobbiton, he had wandered off aimlessly along the road or in the country on either side, but somehow he had steered all the time towards Rivendell. I got here without much adventure, he said, and after a rest I went on with the dwarfs to Dale, my last journey. I shan't travel again. Old Balin had gone away. Then I came back here, and here I have been. I have done this and that. I have written some more of my book, and of course I make up a few songs. They sing them occasionally just to please me, I think. For of course they aren't really good enough for Rivendell. And I listen and I think. Time doesn't seem to pass here. It just is. A remarkable place altogether. I hear all kinds of news from over the mountains and out of the south, but hardly anything from the Shire. I heard about the ring, of course. Gandalf has been here often. Not that he has told me a great deal. He has become closer than ever these last few years. The Dunedain has told me more. Fancy that ring of mine causing such a disturbance. It is a pity that Gandalf did not find out more sooner. I could have brought the thing here myself long ago without so much trouble. I have thought several times of going back to Hobbiton for it, but I am getting old, and they would not let me. Gandalf and Elrond, I mean. They seemed to think that the enemy was looking high and low for me, and would make mincemeat of me, if he caught me tottering about in the wild. And Gandalf said, "The ring has passed on, Bilbo. It would do no good for you, or to others, if you tried to meddle with it again." Odd sort of remark, just like Gandalf. But he said he was looking after you, so I let things be. I am frightfully glad to see you safe and sound. He paused and looked at Frodo doubtfully. "Have you got it here?" he asked in a whisper. "I can't help feeling curious, after all I've heard. I should very much just like to peep at it again." "Yes, I've got it," answered Frodo, feeling a little reluctant. "It looks the same as it ever did." "Well, I should just like to see it for a moment," said Bilbo. When he had dressed, Frodo found that while he slept, the ring had been hung around his neck on a new chain, light but strong. Slowly he drew it out. Bilbo put out his hand, but Frodo quickly drew back the ring. To his distress and amazement, he found that he was no longer looking at Bilbo. A shadow seemed to have fallen between them, and through it he found himself eyeing a little wrinkled creature with a hungry face and bony, groping hands. He felt a desire to strike him. The music and singing round them seemed to falter, and a silence fell. Bilbo looked quickly at Frodo's face and passed his hand across his eyes. "I understand now," he said. "Put it away. I am sorry. Sorry you have come in for this burden. Sorry about everything." Don't adventures ever have an end? I suppose not. Someone else always has to carry on the story. Well, it can't be helped. I wonder if it's any good trying to finish my book. But don't let's worry about it now. Let's have some real news. Tell me all about the Shire. Frodo hid the ring away, and the shadow passed, leaving hardly a shred of memory. The light and music of Rivendell was about him again. Bilbo smiled and laughed happily. Every item of news from the Shire that Frodo could tell, aided and corrected now and again by Sam, was of the greatest interest to him, from the felling of the least tree to the pranks of the smallest child in Hobbiton. They were so deep in the doings of the four farthings that they did not notice the arrival of a man clad in dark green cloth. For many minutes he stood looking down at them, with a smile. Suddenly Bilbo looked up. "Ah, there you are at last, Dunedain," he cried. "Strider," said Frodo. "You seem to have a lot of names." "Well, Strider is one that I haven't heard before anyway," said Bilbo. "Why do you call him that for?" "They call him that in Bree. They call me that in Bree," said Strider, laughing. "And that is how I was introduced to him." "And why do you call him Dunedain?" "The Dunedain," said Bilbo. "He is often called that here. But I thought you knew enough Elvish to know that Dunedain, man of the West, Númenórean. But this is not the time for lessons." He turned to Strider. "Where have you been, my friend? Why weren't you at the feast? The Lady Arwen was there." Strider looked at Bilbo gravely. "I know," he said, "but often I must put mirth aside. Eladin and Elrohir have returned out of the wild, unlooked for, and they had tidings that I wished at once to hear." "Well, my dear fellow," said Bilbo, "now you've heard the news, can't you spare me a moment? I want your help in something urgent. Elrond says this song of mine is to be finished before the end of the evening, and I am stuck. Let's go off into a corner and polish it up." Strider smiled. "Come on, then," he said. "Let me hear it." Frodo was left to himself for a while, for Sam had fallen asleep. He was alone and felt rather forlorn, although all about him the folk of Rivendell were gathered. But those near him were silent, intent upon the music of the voices and the instruments, and they gave no heed to anything else. Frodo began to listen. At first, the beauty of the melodies and of the interwoven words in elven tongues, even though he understood them little, held him in a spell. As soon as he began to attend them, almost it seemed that the words took shape, and visions of far lands and bright things that he had never yet imagined opened out before him, and the firelit hall became like a golden mist above seas of foam that sighed upon the margins of the world. Then endless rivers of swirling gold and silver were flowing over him, too multitudinous for its pattern to be comprehended. It became part of the throbbing air about him, and it drenched and drowned him. Swiftly he sank under its shining weight into a deep realm of sleep. There he wandered long in a dream of music that turned into running water, and then suddenly into a voice. It seemed to be the voice of Bilbo chanting verses. Faint at first, and then clearer ran the words. Eärendil was a mariner that tarried in Arverneen. He built a boat of timber felled in Nimbrathil to journey in. Her sails he wove of silver fair, of silver were her lanterns made. Her prow was fashioned like a swan, and light upon her banners laid. In panoply of ancient kings, in chained rings he armored him. His shining shield was scored with runes, to ward all wounds and harm from him. His bow was made of dragon horn, his arrow's horn of ebony. Of silver was his harbigon, his scabbard of chalcedony. His sword of steel was valiant, of adamant his helmet tall, an eagle plume upon his breast an emerald. Beneath the moon and under star he wandered far from northern strands, bewildered on enchanted ways beyond the days of mortal lands. From gnashing of the narrow ice where shadow lies on frozen hills, from neither heats and burning waste, he turned in haste and moving still on starless waters for a stray. At last he came to night of naught, and passed, and never sight he saw of shining shore nor light he sought. The winds of wrath come driving him, and blindly in the foam he fled. From west to east and errandless, unheralded he homeward sped. Their flying Elwing came to him, and flame was in the darkness lit, more bright than light of diamond, the fire upon her carcanet. The Silmaril she bound on him, and crowned him with the living light, and dauntless then with burning brow he turned his prow, and in the night from other world beyond the sea there strong and free a storm arose, a wind of power in Tarmanel, by paths that seldom mortal goes. His boat it bore with biting breath as might of death across the grey, and long forsaken sea distressed, from east to west he passed away. Though ever night he back was borne on black and roaring waves that ran o'er leagues unlit and foundered shores that drowned before the days began, until he heard on strands of pearl, where ends the world, the music long, wherever foaming billows roll the yellow gold and jewels wan. He saw the mountains silent rise, where twilight lies upon the knees of Valinor and Eldamar, beheld afar beyond the seas. A wanderer escaped from night, to haven white he came at last, to elven home the green and fair, where keen the air, where pale as glass, beneath the hill of Ilmarinen, a glimmer in a valley sheer, the lamplit towers of Tirion are mirrored on the Shadowmere. He tarried there from errantry, and melodies they taught to him, and sages old him marvels told, and harps of gold they brought to him. They clothed him then in elven white, and 7 lights before him sent, as through the Calasirian to hidden land forlorn he went. He came unto the timeless halls, where shining fall the countless years, and endless reigns the elder king in Ilmarinen on mountain sheer. And words unheard were spoken then of folk, of men and elvenkin, beyond the world where visions showed, forbid to those that dwell therein. A ship then new they built for him, of mithril and of elven glass, with shining prow, no shaven oar, nor sail she bore on silver mast. On Silmaril as lantern light, and banner bright with living flame, to gleam thereon by Elbereth herself was set, who thither came, and wings immortal made for him, and laid on him undying doom, to sail the shoreless skies and come behind the sun and light of moon. For ever Evan's lofty hills, where softly silver fountains fall, his wings him bore a wandering light beyond the mighty mountain wall. From world's end then he turned away, and yearned again to find afar his home through shadows journeying, and burning on as island star. On high above the mists he came, a distant flame before the sun, a wonder ere the waking dawn, where gray the Norland waters run. And over Middle Earth he passed, and heard at last the weeping sore of women and of elven maids in elder days, in years of yore. But on him mighty doom was laid, till moon should fade, and orbed star, to pass and tarry nevermore on hither shores where mortals are. For ever still a herald on, an errand that should never rest, to bear his shining lamp afar, the Flammifer of Westerness. The chanting ceased. Frodo opened his eyes and saw that Bilbo was seated on his stool in a circle of listeners who were smiling and applauding. "Now we had better have it again," said an elf. Bilbo got up and bowed. "I am flattered, Linder," he said, "but it will be too tiring to repeat it all." "Not too tiring for you," the elves answered, laughing. "You know you are never tired of reciting your own verses. But really we cannot answer your question at one hearing." "What?" cried Bilbo. "You can't tell which parts were mine and which were the Dunedain's? It is not easy for us to tell the difference between two mortals," said the elf. "Nonsense, Linder," snorted Bilbo. "If you can't distinguish between a man and a hobbit, your judgment is poorer than I imagined. There is different in peas and apples." "Maybe. To sheep, other sheep no doubt appear different," laughed Linder. "Or to shepherds. But mortals have not been our study. We have other business." "I won't argue with you," said Bilbo. "I am sleepy after so much music and singing. I'll leave you to guess if you want to." He got up and came towards Frodo. "Well, that's over," he said in a low voice. "It went off better than I expected. I don't often get asked for a second hearing. What did you think of it?" "I'm not going to try and guess," said Frodo, smiling. "You needn't," said Bilbo. "As a matter of fact, it was all mine, except that Aragorn insisted on my putting in a green stone. He seemed to think it important. I don't know why. Otherwise, he obviously thought the whole thing rather above my head, and he said that if I had the cheek to make verses about Eärendil in the house of Elrond, it was my affair. I suppose he was right." "I don't know," said Frodo. "It seemed to me to fit somehow, though I can't explain. I was half asleep when he began, and it seemed to follow on from something that I was dreaming about. I didn't understand what it was really speaking until near the end." "It is difficult to keep awake here until you get used to it," said Bilbo. "Not that hobbits would ever require quite the elvish appetite for music and poetry and tales. They seem to like them as much as food, or more. They will be going on for a long time yet. What do you say to slipping off for some more quiet talk?" "Can we?" said Frodo. "Of course. This is merrymaking, not business. Come and go as you like, as long as you don't make a noise." They got up and withdrew quietly into the shadows and made for the doors. Sam they left behind, fast asleep, still with a smile on his face. In spite of his delight in Bilbo's company, Frodo felt a tug of regret as they passed out of the Hall of Fire. Even as they stepped over the threshold, a single clear voice rose in song. And it's Elvish, and I am not going to try singing it. Frodo halted for a moment, looking back. Elrond was in his chair, and the fire was on his face like summer light upon the trees. Near him sat the Lady Arwen. To his surprise, Frodo saw that Aragorn stood beside her. His dark cloak was thrown back, and he seemed to be clad in elven mail, and a star shone on his breast. They spoke together, and then suddenly it seemed to Frodo that Arwen turned towards him, and the light of her eyes fell on him from afar and pierced his heart. He stood still enchanted, while the sweet syllables of the elvish song fell like clear jewels of blended word and melody. "It is a song to Elbereth," said Bilbo. "They will sing Nat and other songs of the blessed realm many times tonight. Come on." He led Frodo back to his own little room. It opened onto the gardens and looked south across the ravine of the Brunnen. There they sat for some while, looking through the window at the bright stars above the steep-climbed woods, and talking softly. They spoke no more of the small news of the Shire far away, nor of the dark shadows and perils that encompassed them, but of the fair things they had seen in the world together, of the elves, of the stars, of trees, and the gentle fall of the bright year in the woods. At last there came a knock on the door. "Begging your pardon," said Sam, putting in his head, "but I was just wondering if you would be wanting anything." "And begging yours, Sam Gamgee," replied Bilbo. "I guess you mean that it is time your master went to bed. Well, sir, there is a council early tomorrow, I hear, and he only got up today for the first time." "Quite right, Sam," laughed Bilbo. You trot off and tell Gandalf that he has gone to bed. Good night, Frodo. Bless me, but it has been good to see you again. There are no folk like hobbits, after all, for a real good talk. I am getting very old, and I begin to wonder if I should ever live to see your chapters of our story. Good night. I'll take a walk, I think, and look at the stars of Helbereth in the garden. Sleep well. And that is the end of chapter 1. And I think I'm going to take a quick break and go and get some more water to drink. So I will be right back.
Hey, just need to tell you something that just can't wait. Hey, maybe you'll ride away or maybe you'll stay. But hey, this old guitar and me been thinking for days how to say that our love don't care too much for the unpaid bills on the bedroom floor. Our love lives on cheap wine and singing songs to a wasted sunrise. With you, with you I feel like I am. With you, with you I feel like I am somebody. With you I feel like I am somebody, somebody, somebody. With you I feel like I am somebody in control, like I feel it in my bones, like I'm somebody, somebody, somebody. With you I feel like I am. Come with me from New York to LA. Hey, we'll play this song in every city we stay. And hey, maybe we'll stream 1,000,000 times in one day. Be on our way. Hey, 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 hey. Our love don't care too much for the unpaid bills on the bedroom floor. Our love lives on cheap wine and singing songs to a wasted sunrise. With you, with you I feel like I'm. With you, with you I feel like I am somebody, somebody, somebody. Somebody, somebody, somebody. Somebody in control, like I feel it in my bones, like I'm somebody, somebody, somebody. With you I feel like I am. So we made it in New York and LA, and how they sang in every city we played. I hear we streamed 1,000,000 times yesterday. Oh, how things change, and how the years keep ticking away, and how I wish that you were with me today. 'Cause I'd give anything to do it again. Oh, how we've changed. With you I feel like I am somebody, somebody, somebody. With you I feel like I am somebody, somebody, somebody. With you I feel like I am somebody in control, like I feel it in my bones, like I'm somebody, somebody, somebody. With you I feel like I am. On most nights, I'm just wearing my pajamas, staying up too late, 'cause I'm watching Futurama, thinking where's my drama, my life's no melodrama, leave it off the screen, 'cause it's got no genre. Sometimes I call my mama, ring, yeah, she's always my armor. I want to fly away, far from my mistakes. My baggage has too much weight, hey, hey. So my bed is where I stay. Tell the clouds that I say hey.
Alright friends, we are back. Perry, you're probably home by now, but good night, friend. Hope that you sleep well. Alba, why are you pissed at Google? What has Google done to you? Hello, Drumond. It's good to see you back, friend. Alright, let's see how far we can get into the next chapter. Chapter 2. The Council of Elrond. Next day, Frodo woke early. Feeling refreshed and well, he walked along the terraces above the loud-flowing Brunnen and watched the pale, cool sun rise above the far mountains and shine down, slanting through the thin silver mist. The dew upon the yellow leaves was glimmering, and the woven nets of gossamer twinkled on every bush. Sam walked beside him, saying nothing, but sniffing the air, and looking every now and again with wonder in his eyes at the great heights in the east. The snow was white upon their peaks. On a seat cut in the stone beside a turn in the path, they came upon Gandalf and Bilbo deep in talk. "Hello, good morning," said Bilbo. "Feel ready for the great council?" "I feel ready for anything," answered Frodo. "But most of all, I should like to go walking today and explore the valley. I should like to get into those pine woods up there." He pointed away far up the side of Rivendell to the north. "You may have a chance later," said Gandalf, "but we cannot make any plans yet. There is much to hear and decide today." Wait, Google removed the ability to change your YouTube account email? I think you can go into your Google. Because I can change my email account if I go into... I can't do it from YouTube Studio. But if I go to account.google.com, I can change my email address that's a... Can I? Because I know they went to that thing where YouTube was tied into the Google Plus disaster. Hello, Blaze. Hello, friend. How are you? I hope you were doing well. I will have to ponder this and look into it tomorrow, because I know there is a way to change the email account on YouTube. Alright, I have to go take care of the mama for a minute, so unexpected break is unexpected. I will not be long, friends.
Waiting for the rain. Am I to just surrender? I'm not holding back for anyone. Waiting for the rain. I'm not holding back for anyone. I've been holding on forever, waiting for the rain to come. Who am I to just surrender? I'm not holding back for anyone. I've been holding on forever, waiting for the rain to come. Who am I to just surrender? I'm not holding back for anyone. I've been holding on forever, waiting for the rain to come. Who am I to just surrender? I'm not holding back for anyone. I've been holding on forever, waiting for the rain to come. Who am I to just surrender? I'm not holding back for anyone. Holding on for, waiting for the rain. Am I to just surrender? I'm not holding back for anyone. Waiting for the rain.
Hey, just need to tell you something that just can't wait. Hey, maybe you'll ride away or maybe you'll stay. But hey, this old guitar and me been thinking for days how to say that our love don't care too much for the unpaid bills on the bedroom floor. Our love lives on cheap wine and singing songs to a wasted sunrise. With you, with you, I feel like with you.
And here I thought I had fixed the problem of not unmuting my mic. I have not, because I'm still a dimwit. So anyway, I will look into that, because I think there is a way you can change the email address on a Google account. You can... Yeah, I forgot that I'm using my phone as a remote, and I muted the microphone on the phone like a dumbass and then forgot. Banagi, hello, friend. Everyone coming out. No, I think that there is... They lie. It's like how they say you can't get refunds on super chats, but you can. There's a form. YouTube lies. I have been okay, Wanagi. How have you been? I'm on vacation this week, so I get to be a strummer. But yeah, I will look into that and we will see. Because I think they're lying. I think you can change the email account on a Google account. On a YouTube account. Is it they lie. And transferring up avoiding the idiots of this country. Yeah, there are a lot of idiots, that is for sure. There's a lot of idiots on both sides. Yeah, lots of idiots. Okay, now I will begin again with Chapter 2, The Council of Elrond, because I don't think I was very far into the first page. You do not give up hope, Abel. Because like I said, there's actually a refund form that you can get your money back on a super chat, but Google insists that you cannot. Google lies. I find the secrets. Yeah, I'll look into it and I'll DM you on Discord, Album. Because they lie. I hope you're not actually using Google to look it up, because Google controls the search results. Search on another search engine and see what you can find. Alright, back to The Lord of the Rings. We use Firefox, but what search engine does Firefox use? Is it using Google or is it using Bing? Because I haven't used Firefox in years, but I think Firefox defaults to Google for searching. Chapter 2 of Book 2. Next day, Frodo woke early, feeling refreshed and well. He walked along the terraces above the loud-flowing Brunnen and watched the pale, cool sun rise above the far mountains and shine down, slanting through the thin silver mist. The dew upon the yellow leaves was glimmering, and the woven nets of gossamer twinkled on every bush. Sam walked beside him, saying nothing, but sniffing the air, and looking every now and again with wonder in his eyes at the great heights in the east. The snow was white upon their peaks. On a seat cut in the stone beside a turn in the path, they came upon Gandalf and Bilbo, deep in talk. "Hello, good morning," said Bilbo. "Feel ready for the great council?" "I feel ready for anything," answered Frodo. "But most of all, I should like to go walking today and explore the valley. I should like to get into those pine woods up there." He pointed away far up the side of Rivendell to the north. "You may have a chance later," said Gandalf, "but we cannot make any plans yet. There is much to hear and decide today." Suddenly, as they were talking, a single clear bell rang out. "That is the warning bell for the Council of Elrond," cried Gandalf. "Come along now. Both you and Bilbo are wanted." Frodo and Bilbo followed the wizard quickly along the winding path back to the house. Behind them, uninvited and for the moment forgotten, trotted Sam. Gandalf led them to the porch where Frodo had found his friends the evening before. The light of the clear autumn morning was now glowing in the valley. The noise of bubbling waters came up from the foaming riverbed. Birds were singing, and wholesome peace lay on the land. To Frodo, his dangerous flight and the rumors of the darkness growing in the world outside already seemed only the memories of a troubled dream. But the faces that were turned to meet them as they entered were grave. Elrond was there, and several others were seated in silence about him. Frodo saw Glorfindel and Gloin, and in a corner alone Strider was sitting, clad in his old travel-worn clothes again. Elrond drew Frodo to a seat by his side and presented him to the company, saying, "Here, my friends, is the hobbit, Frodo, son of Drogo. Few have ever come hither through greater peril or on an errand more urgent." He then pointed out and named those whom Frodo had not met before. There was a younger dwarf at Gloin's side, his son Gimli. Beside Glorfindel, there were several other counselors of Elrond's household, of whom Eriscentor was the chief, and with him was Galdor, an elf from the Grey Havens, who had come on an errand from Círdan the shipwright. There was also a strange elf clad in green and brown, Legolas, a messenger from his father, Thranduil, the king of the elves of northern Mirkwood. And seated a little apart was a tall man with a fair and noble face, dark-haired and gray-eyed, proud and stern of glance. He was cloaked and booted as if for a journey on horseback, and indeed, though his garments were rich and his cloak was lined with fur, they were stained with long travel. He had a collar of silver in which a single white stone was set. His locks were shorn about his shoulders. On a baldric he wore a great horn tipped with silver that was now laid upon his knees. He gazed at Frodo and Bilbo with sudden wonder. "Here," said Elrond, turning to Gandalf, "is Boromir, a man from the south. He arrived in the grey morning and seeks for counsel. I have bidden him to be present, for here his questions will be answered." Not all that was spoken and debated in the council need now be told. Much was said of events in the world outside, especially in the south, and in the wide lands east of the mountains. Of these things Frodo had already heard many rumors, but the tale of Gloin was new to him, and when the dwarf spoke he listened attentively. It appeared that amid the splendor of their works of hand the hearts of the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain were troubled. "It is now many years ago," said Gloin, "that a shadow of disquiet fell upon our people. Whence it came we did not at first perceive. Words began to be whispered in secret. It was said that we were hemmed in a narrow place, and that greater wealth and splendor would be found in a wider world. Some spoke of Moria, the mighty works of our fathers that are called in our own tongue Khazad-dûm, and they declared that now at last we had the power and numbers to return. Gloin sighed. Moria, Moria, wonder of the northern world. Too deep we delved there, and woke the nameless fear. Long have its vast mansions lay empty since the children of Durin fled. But now we spoke of it again with longing, and yet with dread, for no dwarf has dared to pass the doors of Khazad-dûm for many lives of kings, save Thror only, and he perished. At last, however, the Balan listened to the whispers and resolved to go. And though Dane did not give leave willingly, he took with him Ori and Oin and many of our folk, and they went away south. That was nigh on 30 years ago. For a while we had news, and it seemed good. Messages reported that Moria had been entered and a great work begun there. Then there was silence, and no word has ever come from Moria since. Then about a year ago a messenger came to Dane, but not from Moria, from Mordor, a horseman in the night, who called Dane to his gate. The Lord Sauron the Great, so he said, wished for our friendship. Rings he would give for it, such as he gave of old, and he asked urgently concerning hobbits, of what kind there were and where they dwelt. For Sauron knows, said he, that one of these was known to you on a time. At this we were greatly troubled, and we gave no answer. And then his fell voice was lowered, and he would have sweetened it if he could. As a small token of your friendship, Sauron asks this, he said, that you should find this thief, such was his word, and get from him, willing or no, a little ring, the least of rings, that once he stole. It is but a trifle that Sauron fancies, and in earnest of your goodwill. Find it, and 3 rings that the dwarf sires possessed of old shall be returned to you, and the realm of Moria shall be yours forever. Find only news of the thief, whether he still lives and where, and you shall have great reward and lasting friendship from the Lord. Refuse, and things will not seem so well. Do you refuse? At that his breath came like the hiss of snakes, and all who stood by shuddered. But Dane said, I say neither yea nor nay. I must consider this message, and what it means under its fair cloak. Consider well, but not too long, said he. The time of my thought is my own to spend, answered Dane. For the present, said he, and he rode into the darkness. Heavy have the hearts of our chieftains been since that night. We needed not the fell voice of the messenger to warn us that his words held both menace and deceit, for we knew already that the power that has re-entered Mordor has not changed, and ever it betrayed us of old. Twice the messenger has returned, and is gone unanswered. The third and last time, so he says, is soon to come, before the ending of the year. And so I have been sent at last by Dane to warn Bilbo that he is sought by the enemy, and to learn, if may be, why he desires this ring, this least of rings. Also we crave the advice of Elrond, for the shadow grows and draws nearer. We discover that messengers have come also to King Brand in Dale, and that he is afraid. We fear that he may yield. Already war is gathering on his eastern borders. If we make no answer, the enemy may move men of his rule to assail King Brand, and Dane also. You have done well to come, said Elrond. You will hear today all that you need in order to understand the purpose of the enemy. There is naught that you can do other than to resist, with hope or without it. But you do not stand alone. You will learn that your trouble is but part of the trouble of all the Western world. The ring. What shall we do with the ring, the least of rings, the trifle that Sauron fancies? That is the doom that we must deem. That is the purpose for which you are called hither. Called, I say, though I have not called you to me, strangers from distant lands. You have come and are here met, in this very nick of time, by chance as it may seem. Yet it is not so. Believe rather that it is ordered that we who sit here, and none others, must now find counsel for the peril of the world. Now, therefore, things shall be openly spoken that have been hidden from all but a few until this day. And first, so that all may understand what is the peril, the tale of the ring shall be told from the beginning, even to this present, and I will begin that tale, though others shall end it. Then all listened while Elrond in his clear voice spoke of Sauron and the rings of power, and their forging in the second age of the world long ago. A part of his tale was known to some there, but the full tale to none, and many eyes were turned to Elrond in fear and wonder as he told of the elven smiths of Ergion and their friendship with Moria, and their eagerness for knowledge by which Sauron ensnared them. For in that time he was not yet evil to behold, and they received his aid and grew mighty in craft, whereas he learned all their secrets and betrayed them, and forged secretly in the mountain of fire the one ring to be their master. But Celebrimbor was aware of him, and hid the three which he had made, and there was war, and the land was laid waste, and the gate of Moria was shut. Then through all the years that followed he traced the ring. But since that history is elsewhere recounted, even as Elrond himself set it down in his books of lore, it is not here recalled. For it is a long tale full of deeds great and terrible, and briefly though Elrond spoke, the sun rode up in the sky, and the morning was past ere he ceased. Of Númenor he spoke, its glory and its fall, and the return of the kings of men to Middle-earth out of the deeps of the sea, borne upon the wings of storm. Then Elendil the Tall and his mighty sons, Isildur and Anarion, became great lords, and the north realm they made in Arnor, and the south realm in Gornor, above the mounts of Anduin. But Sauron of Mordor assailed them, and they made the last alliance of elves and men, and the hosts of Gil-galad and Elendil were mustered in Arnor. Thereupon Elrond paused a while and sighed. I remember well the splendor of their banners, he said. It recalled to me the glory of the elder days and the hosts of Beleriand. So many great princes and captains were assembled, and yet not so many, nor so fair, as when Thangor-Othram was broken, and the elves deemed that evil was ended forever, and it was not so. You remember, said Frodo, speaking his thought aloud in his astonishment. But I thought, he stammered as Elrond turned toward him. I thought that the fall of Gil-galad was a long age ago. So it was indeed, answered Elrond gravely, but my memory reaches back even to the older days. Eärendil was my sire, who was born in Gondolin before its fall, and my mother was Elring, daughter of Dior, son of Luthien of Doria. I have seen 3 ages in the west of the world, and many defeats, and many fruitless victories. I was the herald of Gil-galad and marched with his host. I was at the battle of Dagorlad before the black gate of Mordor, where we had the mastery. For the spear of Gil-galad and the sword of Elendil, Aeglos and Narsil, none could withstand. I beheld the last combat on the slopes of Orodruin, where Gil-galad died, and Elendil fell, and Narsil broke beneath him. But Sauron himself was overthrown, and Isildur cut the ring from his hand with the hilt shard of his father's sword and took it for his own. At this the stranger, Boromir, broke in. So that is what became of the ring, he cried. If ever such a tale was told in the south, it has long been forgotten. I have heard of the great ring of him that we do not name, but we believe that it perished from the world in the ruin of his first realm. Isildur took it. That is tidings indeed. Alas, yes, said Elrond. Isildur took it, as should not have been. It should have been cast then into Orodruin's fire nigh at hand where it was made. But few marked with what Isildur did. He alone stood by his father in that last mortal contest, and by Gil-galad only Círdan stood, and I. But Isildur would not listen to our counsel. This I will have as weregild for my father and my brother, he said, and therefore, whether we would or not, he took it to treasure it. But soon he was betrayed by it to his death. So it was named in the north Isildur's bane. Yet death maybe was better than what else might have befallen him. Only to the north did these tidings come, and only to a few. Small wonder it is that you have not heard them, Boromir. From the ruin of the Gladden Fields, where Isildur perished, 3 men only came ever back from the mountains after long wandering. One of these was Otar, the esquire of Isildur, who bore the shards of the sword of Elendil, and he brought them to Valendil, the heir of Isildur, who being but a child had remained here in Rivendell. But Narsil was broken, and its light extinguished, and it has not yet been forged again. Fruitless did I call the victory of the last alliance? Not wholly so, yet it did not achieve its end. Sauron was diminished, but not destroyed. His ring was lost, but not unmade. The Dark Tower was broken, but its foundations were not removed, for they were made with the power of the ring, and while it remains, they will endure. Many elves and many mighty men and many of their friends had perished in the war. Anarion was slain, and Isildur was slain, and Gil-galad and Elendil were no more. Never again shall there be any such league of elves and men, for men multiply and the firstborn decrease, and the 2 kindreds are estranged. And ever since that day the race of Númenor has decayed, and the span of their years has lessened. In the north, after the war and the slaughter of the Gladden Fields, the men of Westernesse were diminished, and their city of Eneminus beside Lake Evendum fell into ruin, and the heirs of Valendil removed and dwelt at foremost on the high north downs, and that now too is desolate. Men call it Dead Man's Dyke, and they fear to tread there. For the folk of Arnor dwindled, and their foes devoured them, and their lordship passed, leaving only green mounds in the grassy hills. In the south, the realm of Gondor long endured, and for a while its splendor grew, recalling somewhat of the might of Númenor ere it fell. High towers that people built, and strong places, and havens of many ships, and the winged crown of the kings of men were held in awe by folk of many tongue. Their city chief was Osgiliath, citadel of the stars, through the midst of which the river flowed. And Minas Ithil they built, tower of the rising moon, eastward upon a shoulder of the mountains of shadow, and westward at the feet of the white mountain Minas Anor they made, tower of the setting sun. There in the courts of the king grew a white tree, and the seed of that tree which Isildur brought over the deep waters, and the seed of that tree before came from Erisea, and before that out of the uttermost west, in the days before days when the world was young. But in the wearing of the swift years of Middle-earth, the line of Meneldyl, son of Anarion, failed, and the tree withered, and the blood of the Númenorians became mingled with that of lesser men. Then the watch upon the walls of Mordor slept, and dark things crept back to Gorgoroth. And on a time evil things came forth, and they took Minas Ithil and abode in it, and they made it a place of dread, and it is called Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery. Then Minas Anor was named anew Minas Tirith, the Tower of Guard, and these 2 cities were ever at war. But Osgiliath, which lay between them, was deserted, and in its ruins shadows walked. So it has been for many lives of men, but the lords of Minas Tirith still fight on, defying our enemies, keeping the passage of the river from Argonath to the sea. And now that part of the tale that I shall tell is drawn to its close. For in the days of Isildur the ruling ring passed out of all knowledge, and the 3 were released from its dominion. But now in this latter day they are in peril once more, for to our sorrow the one has been found. Others shall speak of its finding, for in that I played small part. He ceased, but at once Boromir stood up, tall and proud, before them. "Give me leave, Master Elrond," said he, "first to say more of Gondor, for verily from the land of Gondor I am come, and it would be well for all to know what passes there. For few I deem know of our deeds, and therefore guess little of their peril if we should fail at last. Believe not that in the land of Gondor the blood of Numenor is spent, nor all its pride and dignity forgotten. By our valor the wild folk of the east are still restrained, and the terror of Morgul kept at bay, and thus alone are peace and freedom maintained in the lands behind us, bulwark of the west. But if the passages of the river should be won, what then? Yet that hour, maybe, is not now far away. The nameless enemy has arisen again. Smoke rises once more from Orodruin that we call Mount Doom. The power of the Black Land grows, and we are hard beset. When the enemy returned, our folk were driven from Ithilien, our fair domain east of the river, though we kept a foothold there and strength of arms. But this very year, in the days of June, sudden war came upon us out of Mordor, and we were swept away. We were outnumbered, for Mordor has allied itself with the Easterlings and the cruel Haradrim. But it was not by numbers that we were defeated. The power was there that we have not felt before. Some said it could be seen like a great black horseman, a dark shadow under the moon. Wherever he came, a madness filled our foes, but fear fell on our boldest, so that horse and man gave way and fled. Only a remnant of our eastern force came back, destroying the last bridge that still stood amid the ruins of Ogalaith. I was in the company that held the bridge until it was cast down behind us. 4 only were saved by swimming, my brother and myself and 2 others. But still we fight on, holding all the west shores of Anduin, and those who shelter behind us give us praise, if ever they hear our name. Much praise, but little help. Only from Rohan now will any man ride to us when we call. In this evil hour I have come on an errand over many dangerous leagues to Elrond. 110 days I have journeyed all alone, but I do not seek allies in war. The might of Elrond is in wisdom, not in weapons, it is said. I come to ask for counsel and the unraveling of hard words. For on the eve of the sudden assault, a dream came to my brother in a troubled sleep, and afterwards a light dream came oft to him again, and once to me. In that dream I thought the eastern sky grew dark, and there was a growing thunder, but in the west a pale light lingered, and out of it I heard a voice, remote but clear, crying, "Seek for the sword that was broken. In Imladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken, stronger than Morgul spells. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand, for Isildur's bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand." Of these words we could understand little. We spoke to our father, Denethor, Lord of Minas Tirith, wise in the lore of Gondor. This only would he say, that Imladris was of old the name among the elves of a far northern dale, where Elrond the half-elven dwelf, greatest of lore masters. Therefore my brother, seeing how desperate was our need, was eager to heed the dream and seek for Imladris. But since the way was full of doubt and danger, I took the journey upon myself. Loth was my father to give me leave, and long have I wandered by roads forgotten, seeking the house of Elrond, of which many had heard, but few knew where it lay. And here in the house of Elrond more shall be made clear to you, said Aragorn, standing up. He cast his sword upon the table that stood before Elrond, and the blade was in 2 pieces. Here is the sword that was broken, he said. And who are you, and what have you to do with Minas Tirith? Asked Boromir, looking in wonder at the lean face of the ranger and his weather-stained cloak. He is Aragorn, son of Arathorn, said Elrond, and he is descended through many fathers from Isildur Elendil's son of Minas Ithil. He is the chief of the Dunduin in the north, and few are now left of that folk. Then it belongs to you and not to me at all, cried Frodo in amazement, springing to his feet, as if he expected the ring to be demanded at once. "It does not belong to either of us," said Aragorn, "but it has been ordained that you should hold it for a while." "Bring out the ring, Frodo," said Gandalf solemnly. "The time has come. Hold it up, and then Boromir will understand the remainder of his riddle." There was a hush, and all eyes turned on Frodo. He was shaken by a sudden shame and fear, and he felt a great reluctance to reveal the ring and a loathing of its touch. He wished he was far away. The ring gleamed and flickered as he held it up before them in his trembling hand. "Behold Isildur's bane," said Elrond. Boromir's eyes glinted as he gazed at the golden thing. "The halfling," he muttered. "Is this the doom of Minas Tirith come at lay? But why then should we seek a broken sword?" "The words were not the doom of Minas Tirith," said Aragorn, "but doom and great deeds are indeed at hand. For the sword that was broken is the sword of Elendil that broke beneath him when he fell. It has been treasured by his heirs when all other heirlooms were lost, for it was spoken of old among us that it should be made again when the ring, Isildur's bane, was found. Now you have seen the sword that you have sought. What would you ask? Do you wish for the house of Elendil to return to the land of Gondor?" "I was not sent to beg any boon, but to seek only the meaning of a riddle," answered Boromir proudly. "Yet we are hard-pressed, and the sword of Elendil would be a help beyond our hope, if such a thing could indeed return out of the shadows of the past." He looked again at Aragorn, and doubt was in his eyes. Frodo felt Bilbo stir impatiently at his side. Evidently he was annoyed on his friend's behalf. Standing suddenly up, he burst out, "All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed from the blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king." Not very good, but to the point, if you need more beyond the word of Elrond. If that was worth a journey of 110 days to hear, you had best listen to it. He sat down with a snort. "I made that up myself," he whispered to Frodo, "for the Dunedain, a long time ago when he first told me about himself. I almost wish that my adventures were not over, and that I could go with him when his day comes." Aragorn smiled at him. Then he turned to Boromir again. "For my part, I forgive your doubt," he said. "Little do I resemble the figures of Elendil and Isildur as they stand carven in their majesty in the halls of Denethor, but I am the heir of Isildur, not Isildur himself. I have had a hard life and long, and the leagues that lie between here and Gondor are a small part in the count of my journeys. I have crossed many mountains and many rivers and trodden many plains, even into the far countries of Rhûn and Harad, where the stars are strange. But my home, such as I have, is in the north, for here the heirs of Valandil have ever dwelt in long line unbroken from father unto son for many generations. Our days have darkened, and we have dwindled, but ever the sword has passed to a new keeper. And this I will say to you, Boromir, ere I end. Lonely men we are, rangers of the wild, hunters, but hunters ever of the servants of the enemy, for they are found in many places, not in Mordor only. If Gondor, Boromir, has been a stalwart tower, we have played another part. Many evil things there are that your strong walls and bright swords do not stay. You know little of the lands beyond your bounds. Peace and freedom, do you say? The North would have known them little but for us. Fear would have destroyed them. But when dark things come from the houseless hills or creep from sunless woods, they fly from us. What roads would any dare to tread? What safety would there be in quiet lands or in the homes of simple men at night if the Dunedain were asleep or were all gone into the grave? And yet less thanks have we than you. Travelers scowl at us, and countrymen give us scornful names. Strider. I am to one fat man who lies within a day's march of foes that would freeze his heart or lay his little town in ruin if he were not guarded ceaselessly. Yet we would not have it otherwise. If simple folk are free from care and fear, simple they will be, and we must be secret to keep them so. That has been the task of my kindred, while the years have lengthened and the grass has grown. But now the world is changing once again. A new hour comes. Isildur's bane is found. Battle is at hand. The sword shall be reforged. I will come to Minas Tirith. Isildur's bane is found, you say, said Boromir. I have seen a bright ring in the halfling's hand, but Isildur perished ere this age of the world began, they say. How do the wise know that this ring is his? And how is it passed down the years until it is brought hither by so strange a messenger? That shall be told, said Elrond. But not yet, I beg, master, said Bilbo. Already the sun is climbing to noon, and I feel the need of something to strengthen me. I had not named you, said Elrond, smiling. But I do so now. Come, tell us your tale, and if you have not yet cast your story into verse, you may tell it in plain words. The briefer, the sooner you shall be refreshed. Very well, said Bilbo. I will do as you bid, but I will now tell the true story, and if some here have heard me tell it otherwise, he looked sidelong at Gloin. I ask them to forget it, and forgive me. I only wish to claim the treasure as my very own in those days, to be rid of the name of thief that was put on me. But perhaps I understand things a little better now. Anyway, this is what happened. To some, their Bilbo's tale was wholly new, and they listened with amazement while the old hobbit, actually not at all displeased, recounted his adventure with Gollum at full length. He did not omit a single riddle. He would have given also an account of his party and disappearance from the Shire if he had been allowed, but Elrond raised his hand. Well told, my friend, he said, but that is enough at this time. For the moment it suffices to know that the ring passed to Frodo, your heir. Let him now speak. Then, less willingly than Bilbo, Frodo told of all his dealings with the ring from the day that it passed into his keeping. Every step of his journey from Hobbiton to the fort of Brunnen was questioned and considered, and everything that he could recall concerning the Black Riders was examined. At last he sat down again. Not bad, Bilbo said to him. You would have made a good story of it if they hadn't kept on interrupting. I tried to make a few notes, but we shall have to go over it again together sometime if I am to write it up. There are whole chapters of stuff before you ever got here. Yes, it is quite a long tale, answered Frodo, but this story still does not seem complete to me. I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf. Galdor of the Havens, who sat nearby, overheard him. You speak for me also, he cried, and turned to Elrond and said, The wise may have good reason to believe that the halfling's trove is indeed the great ring of long debate, unlikely, though, that may seem to those who knew less. But may we not hear the proofs? And I would also ask this also. What of Saruman? He is learned in lore of the rings, yet he is not among us. What is his counsel, if he knows the things that we have heard? The questions that you ask, Galdor, are bound together, said Elrond. I had not overlooked them, and they shall be answered. But these things it is a part of Gandalf to make clear, and I call upon him last, for it is the place of honor, and in all this matter he has been the chief. Some, Galdor, said Gandalf, would think the tidings of Gloin and the pursuit of Frodo proof enough that the halfling's trove is a thing of great worth to the enemy. Yet it is a ring. What then? The 9 of the Nazgul keep. The 7 are taken or destroyed. At this Gloin stirred, but did not speak. The three we know of. What then is this one that he desires so much? There is indeed a wide waste of time between the river and the mountain, between the loss and the finding, but the gap in the knowledge of the wise has been filled at last, yet too slowly, for the enemy has been close behind, closer even than I feared, and well it is that not until this year, this very summer as it seems, did he learn the full truth. Some here will remember that many years ago I myself dared to pass the doors of the necromancer in Dol Guldur, and secretly explored his ways, and found thus that our fears were true. He was none other than Sauron, our enemy of old, at length taking shape and power again. Some too will remember also that Saruman dissuaded us from open deeds against him, and for long we watched him only. Yet at last, as his shadow grew, Saruman yielded, and the council put forth its strength and drove the evil out of Mirkwood. And that was in the very year of the finding of this ring. A strange chance, if chance it was. But we were too late, as Elrond foresaw. Sauron also had watched us, and had long prepared against our stroke, governing Mordor from afar, through Minas Morgul, where his 9 servants dwelt until all was ready. Then he gave way before us, but only feigned to flee, and soon after came to the Dark Tower and openly declared himself. Then for the last time the council met, for now we learned that he was seeking ever more eagerly for the One. We feared then that he had some news of it that we knew nothing of, but Saruman said nay, and repeated what he had said to us before, that the One would never again be found in Middle-earth. At the worst, said he, our enemy knows that we have it not, and that it is still lost. But what was lost may yet be found, he thinks. Fear not, his hope will cheat him. Have I not earnestly studied this matter? Into Anduin the Great it fell, and long ago, while Sauron slept, it was rolled down the river to the sea. There let it lie until the end. Gandalf fell silent, gazing eastward from the porch to the far peaks of the misty mountains, at whose great roots the peril of the world had so long laid hidden. He sighed. There I was at fault, he said. I was lulled by the words of Saruman the wise, but I should have sought for the truth sooner, and our peril would now be less. We were all at fault, said Elrond, and but for your vigilance the darkness maybe would already be upon us. But say on. From the first my heart misgave us, against all reason that I knew, said Gandalf, and I desired to know how the sin came to Gollum, and how long he had possessed it. So I set a watch for him, guessing that he would ere long come forth from his darkness to seek for his treasure. He came, but he escaped and was not found. And then, alas, I let the matter rest, watching and waiting only, until we have too often done. Time passed with many cares, until my doubts were awakened again to sudden fear. Whence came the hobbit's ring? What if my fear was true should be done with it? Those things I must decide, but I spoke yet of my dread to none, knowing the peril of an untimely whisper, if it went awry. In all the long wars with the Dark Tower, treason has ever been our greatest foe. That was 17 years ago. Soon I became aware that spies of many sorts, even beasts and birds, were gathered round the Shire, and my fear grew. I called for the help of the Duindain, and their watch was doubled, and I opened my heart to Aragorn, the heir of Isildur. And I, said Aragorn, counselled that we should hunt for Gollum, too late though it may seem, and since it seemed fit that Isildur's heirs should labor to repair Isildur's fault, I went with Gandalf on the long and hopeless search. Then Gandalf told how they had explored the whole lengths of the Wilderland, down even to the mountains of Shadow and the fences of Mordor. There we had rumor of him, and we guessed that he dwelt there long in the dark hills, but we never found him, and at last I despaired. And then in my despair I thought again of a test that might make the finding of the golem unneeded. The ring itself might tell if it were the one. The memory of words at the council came back to me, words of Saruman, half heeded at the time. I heard them now clearly in my heart. The 9, the 7, and the 3, he said, each had their proper gem, but not so the one. It was round and unadorned, as if it were one of lesser rings, but its maker set marks upon it that the skilled, maybe, could still see and read. What those marks were he had not said, but who would know? The maker, and Saruman? But great though his lore may be, it must have a source. What hand save Sauron's ever held this ring ere it was lost? The hand of Isildur alone. With that thought, I forsook the chase and passed swiftly to Gondor. In former days the members of my order had been well received there, but Saruman most of all. Often he had been for long the guest of the lords of the city. Less welcome did the Lord of Denethor show me than that of old. Begrudgingly he permitted me to search among his hoarded scrolls and books. If indeed you look only, as you say, for records of ancient days and the beginnings of the city, read on, he said. For to me, what was is less dark than what is to come, and that is my care. But unless you have more skill, even than Saruman, who studied here long, you will find naught that is not well known to me. I am master of the lore of this city. So said Denethor, and yet here lie in his hoards many records that few now can read, even of the lore masters, for their scripts and tongues have become dark to later men. And Boromir there lies in Minas Tirith still, unread, I guess, by any save Saruman and myself since the kings failed, a scroll that Isildur made himself, for Isildur did not march away straight from the war in Mordor, as some have told the tale. Some in the north, maybe, Boromir broke in. All know in Gondor that he went first to Minas Anor and dwelt a while with his nephew Menelil, instructing him, before he committed to him the rule of the South Kingdom. In that time he planted there the last sapling of the White Tree in memory of his brother. But in that time he made also this scroll, said Gandalf, and that is not remembered in Gondor, it would seem. For this scroll concerns the ring, and thus wrote Isildur therein. The great ring shall go now to be an heirloom of the North Kingdom, but records of it shall be left in Gondor, where also dwell the heirs of Elendil, lest the time come when the memory of these great matters shall grow dim. And after these words Isildur described the ring such as he found it. It was hot when I first took it, hot as a glade, and my hand was scorched, so that I doubt if ever again I shall be free of the pain of it. Yet even as I write it is cooled, and it seemeth to shrink, though it loses neither its beauty nor its shape. Already the writing upon it, which at first was as clear as red flame, fades and is now only barely to be read. It is fashioned in an elven script of Ergion, for they have no letters in Mordor for such subtle work. But the language is unknown to me. I deem it to be a tongue of the Black Land, since it is foul and uncouth. What evil it says I do not know, but I trace here a copy of it, lest it fade beyond recall. The ring misseth, I think, the heat of Sauron's hand, which was black and yet burned like fire, and so Gil-galad was destroyed. And maybe were the gold made hot again, the writing would be refreshed. But for my part I will risk no hurt to this thing, of all the works of Sauron, the only fair. It is precious to me, though I buy it with great pain. When I read these words, my quest was ended, for the traced writing was indeed as Isildur guessed, in the tongue of Mordor and the servants of the tower, and what was said therein was already known. For in the day that Sauron first put on the one, Celebrimbor, maker of the three, was aware of him, and from afar he heard him speak these words, and so his evil purposes were revealed. At once I took my leave of Denethor, but even as I went northwards, messages came to me out of Lorien that Aragon had passed that way, and that he had found the creature called Golem. Therefore I went first to meet him and hear his tale. Into what deadly perils he had gone alone, I dared not guess. There is little need to tell of them, said Aragorn. If a man must needs walk inside of the Black Gate, or tread the deadly flowers of Morgul Vale, then perils he will have. I too despaired at last, and I began my homeward journey. And then, by fortune, I came suddenly on what I sought, the marks of soft feet beside a muddy pool. But now the trail was fresh and swift, and it led not to Mordor, but away. Along the skirts of the dead marshes I followed it, and then I had him. Lurking by a stagnant mere, peering in the water as the dark eve fell, I caught him, Golem. He was covered with green slime. He will never love me, I fear, for he bit me, and I was not gentle. Nothing more did I ever get from his mouth than the marks of his teeth. I deemed it the worst part of all my journey, the road back, watching him day and night, making him walk before me with a halter on his neck, gagged, until he was tamed by lack of drink and food, driving him ever towards Mirkwood. I brought him there at last, and gave him to the elves, for we had agreed that this should be done, and I was glad to be rid of his company, for he stank. For my part, I hoped never to look upon him again, but Gandalf came and endured long speech with him. Yes, long and weary, said Gandalf, but not without profit. For one thing, the tale he told of his loss agreed with that which Bilbo has now told openly for the first time, but that mattered little, since I had already guessed it. But I learned then first that Golem's ring came out of the great river nigh to the Gladden fields, and I learned also that he had possessed it long, many lives of his small kind. The power of the ring had lengthened his years far beyond their span, but the power only the great rings wield. And if that is not proof enough, Galdor, there is the other test that I spoke of. Upon this very ring, which you have here seen held aloft, round and unadorned, the letters that Isindel reported may still be read, if one has the strength of will to set the golden thing in a fire for a while. That I have done, and this I have read. The change in the wizard's voice was astounding. Suddenly it became menacing, powerful, harsh as stone. A shadow seemed to pass over the high sun, and the porch for a moment grew dark. All trembled, and the elves stopped their ears. Never before has any voice dared to utter words of that tongue in Imladris, Gandalf the Grey, said Elrond, as the shadow passed and the company breathed once more. And let us hope that none will ever speak it here again, answered Gandalf. None the less, I do not ask your pardon, Master Elrond, for if that tongue is not soon to be heard in every corner of the West, then let all put doubt aside that this thing is indeed what the wise have declared the treasure of the enemy, fraught with all his malice, and in it lies a great part of his strength of old. Out of the black years come the words that the smiths of Eregion heard, and knew that they had been betrayed. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Know also, my friends, that I learned more yet from Golem. He was loth to speak, and his tale was unclear, but it is beyond all doubt that he went to Mordor, and there all that he knew was forced from him. Thus the enemy knows now that the one is found, that it was long in the Shire, and since his servants have pursued it almost to our door, he soon will know, already he may know, even as I speak, that we have it here. All sat silent for a while. until at length Boromir spoke. "He is a small thing, you say, this golem. Small, but great in mischief. What became of him? To what doom did you put him?" "He is in prison, but no worse," said Aragorn. "He had suffered much. There is no doubt that he was tormented, and the fear of Sauron lies black on his heart. Still, I, for one, am glad that he is safely kept by the watchful elves of Mirkwood. His malice is great, and gives him a strength hardly to be believed in one so lean and withered. He could work much mischief still if he were free, and I do not doubt that he was allowed to leave Mordor on some evil errand." "Alas, alas," cried Legolas, and in his fair elvish face there was great distress. "The tidings that I was sent to bring must now be told. They are not good, but only here have I learned how evil they may seem to this company. Smeagol, who is now called Gollum, has escaped." "Escaped!" cried Aragorn. "That is ill news indeed. We shall all rue it bitterly, I fear. How came the folk of Thranduil to fail in their trust?" "Not through lack of watchfulness," said Legolas, "but perhaps through over-kindliness. And we fear that the prisoner had aid from others, and that more is known of our doings than we would wish. We guarded this creature day and night at Gandalf's bidding, much though we wearied of the task. But Gandalf bade us hope still for his cure, and we had not the heart to keep him ever in dungeons under the earth, where he would fall back into his old black thoughts." "You were less tender to me," said Gloin, with a flash of his eyes, as old memories were stirred of his imprisonment in the deep places of the Elven King's halls. "Now come," said Gandalf. "Pray do not interrupt, my dear Gloin. That was a regrettable misunderstanding, long set right. If all the grievances that stand between elves and dwarfs are to be brought up here, we may as well abandon the council." Gloin rose and bowed, and Legolas continued. "In the days of fair weather we led Gollum through the woods, and there was a high tree standing alone far from the others which he liked to climb. Often we let him mount up to the highest branches until he felt the free wind, but we set a guard at the tree's foot. One day he refused to come down, and the guards had no mind to climb after him. He had learned the trick of clinging to boughs with his feet as well as with his hands, so they sat by the tree far into the night. It was that very night of summer, yet moonless and starless, that orcs came on us at unawares. We drove them off after some time. They were many and fierce, but they came from over the mountains and were unused to the woods. When the battle was over, we found that Gollum was gone, and his guards were slain or taken. It then seemed plain to us that the attack had been made for his rescue, and that he knew of it beforehand. How that was contrived we cannot guess, but Gollum is cunning, and the spies of the enemy are many. The dark things that were driven out in the year of the dragon's fall have returned in greater numbers, and Mirkwood is again an evil place, save where our realm is maintained. We have failed to recapture Gollum. We came on his trail among these many orcs, and it plunged deep into the forest going south. But ere long it escaped our skill, and we dared not continue the hunt, for we were drawing nigh to Dol Guldur, and that is still a very evil place. We do not go that way." "Well, well, he is gone," said Gandalf. "We have no time to seek for him again. He must do what he will. But he may play a part yet that neither he nor Sauron have foreseen. And now I will answer Galdor's other questions. What of Saruman? What are his counsels to us in this need? This tale I must tell in full, for only Elrond has heard it yet, and that in brief, but it will bear on all that we must resolve. It is the last chapter in the Tale of the Ring, so far as it has yet gone. At the end of June I was in the Shire, but a cloud of anxiety was on my mind, and I rode to the southern borders of the little land, for I had a foreboding of some danger, still hidden from me but drawing near. There messages reached me, telling me of war and defeat in Gondor, and when I heard of the Black Shadow, a chill smote my heart. But I found nothing save a few fugitives from the south. Yet it seemed to me that on them sat a fear of which they would not speak. I turned then east and north and journeyed along the greenway, and not far from Bree I came upon a traveler sitting on a bank beside the road with his grazing horse beside him. It was Radagast the Brown, who at one time dwelt at Roscobel, near the borders of Mirkwood. He's one of my order, but I had not seen him for many a year. "Gandalf," he cried, "I was seeking you, but I am a stranger in these parts. All I knew was that you might be found in a wild region with the uncouth name of Shire." "Your information was correct," I said, "but do not put it that way if you meet any of the inhabitants. You are near the borders of the Shire now, and what do you want with me? It must be pressing. You are never a traveler unless driven by great need." "I have an urgent errand," he said. "My news is evil." Then he looked about him, as if the hedges might have ears. "Nazgul," he whispered, "the 9 are abroad again. They have crossed the river secretly and are moving westward. They have taken the guise of riders in black." I knew then what I had dreaded without knowing it. "The enemy must have some great need or purpose," said Radagast, "but what it is that makes him look to these distant and desolate parts I cannot guess." "What do you mean?" said I. "I have been told that wherever they go the riders ask for news of a land called Shire." "The Shire," I said, but my heart sank, for even the wise might fear to withstand the 9 when they are gathered together under their fell chieftain. A great king and sorcerer he was of old, and now he wields a deadly fear. "Who told you, and who sent you?" I asked. "Saruman the White," answered Radagast, "and he told me to say that if you feel the need he will help, but you must seek his aid at once or it will be too late." And that message brought me hope, for Saruman the White is the greatest of my order. Radagast is, of course, a worthy wizard, a master of shapes and changes of hue, and he has much lore of herbs and beasts, and birds are especially his friends. But Saruman has long studied the arts of the enemy himself, and thus we have often been able to forestall him. It was by the devices of Saruman that we drove him from Dol Guldur. It might be that he had found some weapons that would drive back the 9. "I will go to Saruman," I said. "Then you must go now," said Radagast, "for I have wasted time in looking for you, and the days are running short. I was told to find you before midsummer, and that is now here. Even if you set out from this spot, you will hardly reach him before the 9 discover the land that they seek. I myself shall turn back at once." And with that he mounted, and would have ridden straight off. "Stay a moment," I said. "We shall need your help, and the help of all things that will give it. Send out messages to all the beasts and birds that are your friends. Tell them to bring news of anything that bears on the matter to Saruman and Gandalf. Let messages be sent to Othank." I would do that, he said, and rode off as if the 9 were after him. I could not follow him then and there. I had ridden very far already that day, and I was as weary as my horse, and I needed to consider matters. I stayed the night in Bree and decided that I had no time to return to the Shire. Never did I make a greater mistake. However, I wrote a message to Frodo and trusted to my friend the innkeeper to send it to him. I rode away at dawn and came at long last to the dwelling of Saruman. That is far south in Isengard, in the end of the Misty Mountains, not far from the Gap of Rohan. And Boromir will tell you that it is a great open vale that lies between the Misty Mountains and the northmost foothills of Ered Nimrais, the White Mountains of his home. But Isengard is a circle of sheer rocks that enclose a valley as with a wall, and in the midst of that valley is a tower of stone called Orthanc. It was not made by Saruman, but by the men of Numenor long ago, and it is very tall and has many secrets. Yet it looks not to be a work of craft. It cannot be reached save by passing the circle of Isengard, and in that circle there is only one gate. Late one evening I came to the gate, like a great arch in the wall of rock, and it was strongly guarded. but the keepers of the gate were on the watch for me and told me that Saruman awaited me. I rode under the arch, and the gate closed silently behind me, and suddenly I was afraid, though I knew no reason for it. When I rode to the foot of Orthanc and came to the stairs of Saruman, and there he met me and led me up to his high chamber, he wore a ring on his finger. "So you have come, Gandalf," he said to me gravely, but in his eyes there seemed to be a white light, as if a cold laughter was in his heart. "Yes, I have come," I said. "I have come for your aid, Saruman the White," and that title seemed to anger him. "Have you indeed, Gandalf the Grey?" he scoffed. "For aid? It has seldom been heard of that Gandalf the Grey sought for aid, one so cunning and so wise, wandering from the lands and concerning himself in every business, whether it belongs to him or not." I looked at him and wondered. "But if I am not deceived," said I, "things are now moving which will require the union of all our strength." "That may be so," he said, "but the thought is late in coming to you. How long, I wonder, have you concealed from me, the head of the council, a matter of greatest import? What brings you now from your lurking place in the Shire?" "The 9 have come forth again," I answered. "They have crossed the river, so Radagast said to me." "Radagast the Brown," laughed Sauron, and he no longer concealed his scorn. "Radagast the bird tamer, Radagast the simple, Radagast the fool. Yet he had just the wit to play the part that I set him. And you have come, and that was all the purpose of my message. And here you will stay, Gandalf the Grey, and rest from journeys, for I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker, Saruman of many colors." I looked then and saw that his robes, which had seemed white, were not so, but were woven of all colors, and if he moved they shimmered and changed hue so that the eye was bewildered. "I liked white better," I said. "White," he sneered. "It serves as a beginning. White cloth may be dyed, the white page may be overwritten, and the white light can be broken." "In which case it is no longer white," said I, "and he that breaks a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom." "You need not speak to me as to one of the fools that you take for friends," said he. "I have not brought you hither to be instructed by you, but to give you a choice." He drew himself up then and began to declaim as if he were making a speech long rehearsed. "The elder days are gone, the middle days are passing, the younger days are beginning. The time of the elves is over, but our time is at hand, the world of men which we must rule. But we must have power to order all things as we will, for that good which only the wise can see. And listen, Gandalf, my old friend and helper," he said, coming near and speaking now in a softer voice. I said we, for we it may be, if you will join me. "A new power is rising. Against it the old allies and policies will not avail us at all. There is no hope left in elves or dying Númenor. This, then, is one choice before you, before us. We may join with that power. It will be wise, Gandalf. There is hope that way. Its victory is at hand, and there will be rich reward for those that aided it. As the power grows, its proved friends will also grow, and the wise, such as you and I, may with patience come at last to direct its course, to control it. We can bide our time, we can keep our thoughts in our hearts, deploring many evils done by the way, but approving the high and ultimate purpose, knowledge, rule, order, all the things that we have so far striven in vain to accomplish, hindered rather than helped by our weak or idle friends. There need not be, there would not be, any real change in our designs, only in our means." "Saruman," I said, "I have heard speeches of this kind before, but only in the mouths of emissaries sent from Mordor to deceive the ignorant. I cannot think that you brought me so far only to weary my ears." He looked at me sidelong and paused a while, considering. "Well, I see that this wise course does not commend itself to you," he said. "Not yet. Not if some better way can be contrived." He came and laid his long arm on my hand. "And why not, Gandalf?" He whispered. "Why not? The ruling ring. If we could command that, then the power would pass to us. That is in truth why I brought you here, for I have many eyes in my service, and I believe that you know where this precious thing now lies. Is it not so? Or why do the 9 ask for the Shire, and what is your business there?" As he said this, a lust which he could not conceal shone suddenly in his eyes. "Saruman," I said, standing away from him, "only one hand at a time can wield the one, and you know that well, so do not trouble to say 'we.' But I would not give it, nay, I would not give even news of it to you, now that I learn your mind. You were head of the council, but you have unmasked yourself at last. Well, the choices are, it seems, to submit to Sauron or to yourself. I will take neither. Have you others to offer?" He was cold now and perilous. "Yes," he said. "I did not expect you to show wisdom, even in your own behalf. But I gave you the chance of aiding me willingly, and so saving yourself much trouble and pain. The third choice is to stay here until the end." "Until what end?" "Until you reveal to me where the one may be found. I may find means to persuade you, or until it is found in your despite, and the ruler has time to turn to lighter matters, to devise, say, a fitting reward for the hindrance and insolence of Gandalf the Grey." "That may not prove to be one of the lighter matters," said I. He laughed at me, for my words were empty, and he knew it. They took me, and they set me alone on the pinnacle of Orthanc, in the place where Saruman was accustomed to watch the stars. There is no descent save by a narrow stair of many thousand steps, and the valley below seems far away. I looked on it and saw that, whereas it had once been green and fair, it was now filled with pits and forges. Wolves and orcs were housed in Isengard, for Saruman was mustering a great force of his own account, in rivalry of Sauron, and not in his service yet. Over all his works a dark smoke hung and wrapped itself about the sides of Orthanc. I stood alone in an island in the clouds, and had no chance of escape, and my days were bitter. I was pierced with cold, and I had but little room in which to pace to, brooding on the coming of the riders to the north. That the 9 had indeed arisen, I felt assured, apart from the words of Saruman, which might be lies. Long ere I came to Isengard, I had heard tidings by the way that could not be mistaken. Fear was ever in my heart for my friends in the Shire, but still I had some hope. I hoped that Frodo had set forth at once, as my letter had urged, and that he had reached Rivendell before the deadly pursuit began, and both my fear and my hope proved ill-founded, for my hope was founded on a fat man in Bree, and my fear was founded on the cunning of Sauron. But fat men who sell ale have many calls to answer, and the power of Sauron is still less than fear makes it. But in the circle of Isengard, trapped and alone, it was not easy to think that the hunters before whom all have fled or fallen would falter in the Shire far away. "I saw you," cried Frodo. "You were walking backwards and forwards. The moon shone in your hair." Gandalf paused, astonished, and looked at him. "It was only a dream," said Frodo, "but it suddenly came back to me. I'd quite forgotten it. And some time ago, after I left the Shire, I think." "Then it was late in coming," said Gandalf, "as you will see. I was in an evil plight, and those who know me will agree that I have seldom been in such need, and do not bear such misfortune well. Gandalf the Grey caught like a fly in a spider's treacherous web, yet even the most subtle spiders may leave a weak thread. At first I feared, as Saruman no doubt intended, that Radagast had also fallen, yet I had caught no hint of anything wrong in his voice or in his eye at our meeting. If I had, I should never have gone to Isengard, or I should have gone more warily. So Saruman guessed, and he had concealed his mind and deceived his message. It would have been useless in any case to try and win over the honest Radagast to treachery. He sought me in good faith, and so persuaded me. That was the undoing of Saruman's plot, for Radagast knew no reason why he should not do as I asked, and he rode away towards Mirkwood, where he had many friends of old. And the eagles of the mountains went far and wide, and they saw many things, the gathering of wolves, and the mustering of orcs, and the 9 riders going hither and thither in the mutterings in the lands. And they heard news of the escape of Gollum, and they sent a messenger to bring these tidings to me. So it was that when summer waned, there came a night of moon, and Gwahir the Wind Lord, swiftest of the great eagles, came unlooked for to Orthanc, and he found me standing on the pinnacle. Then I spoke to him, and he bore me away before Saruman was aware. I was far from Isengard ere the wolves and orcs issued from the gate to pursue me. "How far can you bear me?" I said to Gwahir. "Many leagues," said he, "but not to the ends of the earth. I was sent to bear tidings, not burdens." "Then I must have a steed on land," I said, "and a steed surpassingly swift, for I have never had such need of haste before." "Then I will bear you to Edoras, where the Lord of Rohan sits in his halls," he said, "for that is not very far off." And I was glad, for in the Riddermark of Rohan the Rohirrim, the horse lords, dwell, and there are no horses like those that are bred in that great vale between the misty mountains and the white. "Are the men of Rohan still to be trusted, do you think?" I said to Gwahir, for the treason of Sauron had shaken my faith. "They pay a tribute of horses," he answered, "and send many yearly to Mordor, or so it is said, but they are not yet under the yoke. But if Saruman has become evil, as you say, then their doom cannot be long delayed." He set me down in the land of Rohan ere dawn, and now I have lengthened my tale over long. The rest must be more brief. In Rohan I found evil already at work. The lies of Saruman, and the king of the land would not listen to my warnings. He bade me take a horse and be gone, and I chose one much to my liking, but little to his. I took the best horse in his land, and I have never seen the like of him. "Then he must be a noble beast indeed," said Aragorn, "and it grieves me more than many tidings that might seem worse to learn that Sauron levies such tribute. It was not so when last I was in the land." "Nor is it now, I swear," said Boromir. "It is a lie that comes from the enemy. I know the men of Rohan, true and valiant, our allies, dwelling still in the lands that we gave them long ago." "The shadow of Mordor lies on distant lands," answered Aragorn. "Saruman has fallen under it. Rohan is beset. Who knows what you will find there if ever you return?" "Not this at least," said Boromir, "that they will buy their lives with horses. They love their horses next to their kin, and not without reason, for the horses of the Riddermark come from the fields of the north, far from the shadow, and their race, as that of their masters, is descended from the free days of old." "True indeed," said Gandalf, "and there is one among them that might have been foaled in the morning of the world. The horses of the 9 cannot vie with him, tireless, swift as the flowing wind. Shadowfax they called him. By day his coat glistens like silver, and by night it is like a shade, and he passes unseen. Light is his footfall. Never before had any man mounted him, but I took him and I tamed him, and so speedily he bore me that I reached the Shire when Frodo was on the Barrow Downs, though I set out from Rohan when he was only set out from Hobbiton. But fear grew in me as I rode. Ever as I came forth I heard tidings of the riders, and though I gained them day by day, they were ever before me. They had divided their forces, I learned. Some remained on the eastern borders, not far from the Greenway, and some invaded the Shire from the south. I came to Hobbiton, and Frodo was gone, but I had words with old Gamgee. Many words, and few to the point. He had much to say about the shortcomings of the new owners of Bag End. "I can't abide changes," said he, "not at my time of life, and least of all changes for the worst. Changes for the worst," he repeated many times. Worst is a bad word, I said to him, and I hope you do not live to see it. But amidst his talk I gathered at last that Frodo had left Hobbiton less than a week before, and that a black horseman had come to the hill the same evening. Then I rode on in fear. I came to Buckland and found it in an uproar, as busy as a hive of ants that had been stirred with a stick. I came to the house at Crick Hollow, and it was broken open and empty, but on the threshold there lay a cloak that had been Frodo's. Then for a while hope left me, and I did not wait to gather news, or I might have been comforted. But I rode on the trail of the riders. It was hard to follow, for 2 had ridden towards Bree, and that way I went, for I thought of words that might be said to the innkeeper. Butterbur, they call him, thought I. If this delay was his fault, I will melt all the butter in him. I will roast the old fool over a slow fire. He expected no less, and when he saw my face, he fell down flat and began to melt on the spot. "What did you do to him?" said Frodo in alarm. "He was really very kind to us and did all that he could." Gandalf laughed. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I did not bite, and I barked very little. So overjoyed was I by the news that I had got out of him when he stopped shaking that I embraced the old fellow. How it happened I could not then guess, but I learned that you had been in Bree the night before and had gone off that morning with Strider." "Strider!" I cried, shouting for joy. "Yes, sir. I am afraid so, sir," said Butterbur, mistaking me. "He got at them in spite of all that I could do, and they took up with him. They behaved very queer all the time they were here. Willful, you might say." "Ass, fool, thrice worthy and beloved Barlaman," said I. "It's the best news I've had since midsummer. It's worth a gold piece at least. May your beard be laid under an enchantment of surpassing excellence for 7 years," said I. "Now I can take a night's rest, the first since I have forgotten when." So I stayed there that night, wondering much what had become of the riders, for only of 2 had there been yet any news in Bree, it seemed. But in the night we heard more. 5 at least came from the west, and they threw down the gates and passed through Bree like a howling wind, and the Bree folk are still shivering and expecting the end of the world. I got up before dawn and went after them. I do not know, but it seems clear to me that this is what happened. Their captain remained in secret away south of Bree, while 2 rode ahead through the village, and 4 more invaded the Shire. But when these were foiled in Bree and at Crick Hollow, they returned to their captain with tidings, and so left the road unguarded for a while, except by their spies. The captain then sent some eastward straight across country, and he himself with the rest rode along the road in great wrath. I galloped to Weathertop with it like a gale, and I reached it before sundown on my 2nd day from Bree, and they were there ahead of me. They drew away from me, for they felt the coming of my anger, and they dared not face it while the sun was in the sky. But they closed round at night, and I was besieged on the hilltop in the old ring of Amon Sul. I was hard put to it indeed. Such light and flame cannot have been seen on Weathertop since the war beacons of old. At sunrise I escaped and fled towards the south. I could not hope to do more. It was impossible to find you, Frodo, in the wilderness, and it would have been folly to try it with all the 9 at my heels. So I had to trust to Aragorn, but I hoped to draw some of them off, and yet reach Rivendell ahead of you and send out help. 4 riders did indeed follow me, but they turned back after a while and made for the ford, it seems. That helped a little, for there were only 5, not 9, when your camp was attacked. I reached here at last by a long hard road, up the Horwell and through the Eton moors, and down from the north. It took me nearly 14 days from Weathertop, for I could not ride among the rocks of the Trollfells, and Shadowfax departed. I sent him back to his master, but a great friendship has grown between us, and if I have need he will come at my call. But so it was that I came to Rivendell only 3 days before the ring, and news of its peril had already been brought here, which proved well indeed. And that, Frodo, is the end of my account. May Elrond and the others forgive the length of it. But such a thing has not happened before, that Gandalf broke tryst, and did not come when he promised. An account to the ring-bearer of so strange an event was required, I think. Well, the tale is now told, from first to last. Here we all are, and here is the ring, but we have not yet come any nearer to our purpose. What shall we do with it? There was silence. At last Elrond spoke again. "This is grievous news concerning Saruman," he said, "for we trusted him, and he is deep in all our counsels. It is perilous to study too deeply the arts of the enemy, for good or ill. But such falls and betrayals, alas, have happened before. Of the tales that we have heard this day, the tale of Frodo was most strange to me. I have known few hobbits save Bilbo here, and it seems to me that he is perhaps not so alone and singular as I had thought him. The world has changed much since I was last on the westward roads. The Barrow-wights we know by many names, and of the old forest many tales have been told. All that now remains is but an outlier of its northern march. Time was when a squirrel could go from tree to tree, from what is now the Shire to Dunland west of Isengard. In those lands I journeyed once, and many things wild and strange I knew. But I had forgotten Bombadil, if indeed this is still the same that walked the woods and hills long ago. And even then he was older than the old. That was not then his name. Eowyn Ben-Nadar we called him, oldest and fatherless, but many other name he has since been given by other folk, Forn by the dwarves, or awed by northern men, and other names besides. He is a strange creature, but maybe I should have summoned him to our council." "He would not have come," said Gandalf. "Could we not still send message to him and obtain his help?" asked Aristar. "It seems that he has a power even over the ring." "No, I should not put it so," said Gandalf. "Say rather that the ring has no power over him. He is his own master, but he cannot alter the ring itself, nor break its power over others. And now he is withdrawn into a little land, within bounds that he has set, though none can see them, waiting perhaps for a change of days, and he will not step beyond them." "But within those bounds nothing seems to dismay him," said Aristor. "Would he not take the ring and keep it there, forever harmless?" "No," said Gandalf, not willingly. "He might do so if all the free folk of the world begged him, but he would not understand the need. And if he were given the ring, he would soon forget it, or most likely throw it away. Such things have no hold on his mind. He would be a most unsafe guardian, and that alone is answer enough." "But in any case," said Glorfindel, "to send the ring to him would only postpone the day of evil. He is far away. We cannot now take it back to him, unguessed, unmarked by a spy. And even if we could, sooner or later the Lord of the Rings would learn of its hiding place and would bend all his power towards it. Could that power be defied by Bombadil alone? I think not. I think that in the end, if all else is conquered, Bombadil will fall, last as he was first, and then night will come." "I know little of Eowyn save the name," said Galdor, "but Glorfindel, I think, is right. Power to defy our enemy is not in him, unless such power is in the earth itself. And yet we see that Sauron can torture and destroy the very hills. What power still remains lies with us, here in Imladris, or with Círdan at the Havens, or in Lorien. But have they the strength, have we here the strength to withstand the enemy, the coming of Sauron at the last, when all else is overthrown?" "I have not the strength," said Elrond. "Neither have they." "Then if the ring cannot be kept from him forever by strength," said Glorfindel, "two things only remain for us to attempt: to send it over the sea, or to destroy it." "But Gandalf has revealed to us that we cannot destroy it by any craft that we here possess," said Elrond. "And those who dwell beyond the sea would not receive it. For good or ill, it belongs to Middle-earth. It is for us who still dwell here to deal with it." "Then," said Glorfindel, "let us cast it into the deeps, and so make the lies of Saruman come true. For it is clear now that even at the council his feet were already on a crooked path. He knew that the ring was not lost forever, but wished us to think so, for he began to lust for it himself. Yet oft in lies truth is hidden. In the sea it would be safe." "Not safe forever," said Gandalf. "There are many things in the deep waters, and seas and lands may change, and it is not our part here to take thought only for a season, or for a few lives of men, or for a passing age of the world. We should seek a final end of this menace, even if we do not hope to make one. And that we shall not find on the roads to the sea," said Galdor. "If the return to Erwain be thought too dangerous, then flight to the sea is now fraught with gravest peril. My heart tells me that Sauron will expect us to take the western way when he learns what has befallen. He soon will. The 9 have been unhorsed indeed, but that is but a respite, ere they find new steeds and swifter. Only the waning might of Gondor stands now between him and the march in power between the coasts into the north. And if he comes assailing the white towers and the heavens, hereafter the elves may have no escape from the lengthening shadows of Middle-earth." "Long yet will that march be delayed," said Boromir. "Gondor wanes, you say, but Gondor stands, and even the end of its strength is still very strong. And yet its vigilance can no longer keep back the 9, said Galdor. And other roads he may find that Gondor does not guard. Then, said Erestor, there are but 2 courses, as Glorfindel already has declared, to hide the ring forever or to unmake it, but both are beyond our power. Who will read this riddle for us? None here can do so, said Elrond gravely. At least none can foretell what will come to pass, if we take this road or that. But it seems to me now clear which is the road that we must take. The westward road seems easiest, therefore it must be shunned. It will be watched. Too often the elves have fled that way. Now at this last we must take a hard road, a road unforeseen. There lies our hope, if hope it be, to walk into peril to Mordor. We must send the ring to the fire. Silence fell again. Frodo, even in that fair house, looking out upon a sunlit valley filled with the noise of clear waters, felt a dead darkness in his heart. Boromir stirred, and Frodo looked at him. He was fingering his great horn and frowning. At length he spoke. I do not understand all this, he said. Saruman is a traitor, but did he not have a glimpse of wisdom? Why do you speak ever of hiding and destroying? Why should we not think that the great ring has come into our hands to serve us in the very hour of need? Wielding it, the free lords of the free may surely defeat the enemy. That is what he most fears, I deem. The men of Mordor are valiant, and they will never submit, but they may be beaten down. Valor needs first strength, and then a weapon. Let the ring be your weapon, if it has such power as you say. Take it and go forth to victory. Alas, no, said Elrond. We cannot use the ruling ring. That we know too well. It belongs to Sauron and was made by him alone, and is altogether evil. Its strength, Boromir, is too great for anyone to wield at will, save only those who have already a great power of their own. But for them it holds an even deadlier peril. The very desire of it corrupts the heart. Consider Saruman. If any of the wise should with this ring overthrow the Lord of Mordor, using his own arts, he would then set himself on Sauron's throne, and yet another dark lord would appear. And that is another reason why the ring should be destroyed. As long as it is in the world, it will be a danger even to the wise, for nothing is evil in the beginning. Even Sauron was not so. I fear to take the ring to hide it. I will not take the ring to wield it. Nor I, said Gandalf. Boromir looked at them doubtfully, but he bowed his head. So be it, he said. Then in Gondor we must trust to such weapons as we have, and at the least, while the wise ones guard this ring, we will fight on. Mayhap the sword that was broken may still stem the tide, if the hand that wields it has inherited not an heirloom only, but the sinews of the kings of men. Who can tell, said Aragorn, but we will put it to the test one day. May the day not be too long delayed, said Boromir, for though I do not ask for aid, we need it. It would comfort us to know that others fought also with all the means that they have." "Then be comforted," said Elrond, "for there are other powers and realms that you know not, and they are hidden from you. And when the Great flows past many shores, ere it comes to Argonath and the gates of Gondor." "Still it might be well for all," said Gloin the dwarf, "if all these strengths were joined, and the powers of each were used in league. Other rings there may be, less treacherous, that might be used in our need. The 7 are lost to us. If Balin has not found the ring of Thror, which was the last naught has been heard of it since Thror perished in Moria. Indeed, I may now reveal that it was partly in hope to find that ring that Balin went away." "Balin will find a ring in Moria," said Gandalf. "Thror gave it to Thrain, his son, but not Thrain to Thorin. It was taken with torment from Thrain in the dungeons of Dol Guldur. I came too late." "Ah, alas," cried Gloin, "when will the day come of our revenge? But still there are 3. What of the 3 rings of the elves? Very mighty rings, it is said. Do not the elf lords keep them? Yet they too were made by the Dork Lord long ago. Are they idle? I see elf lords here. Will they not say?" The elves returned no answer. "Did you not hear me, Gloin?" said Elrond. "The 3 were not made by Sauron, nor did he ever touch them. But of them it is not permitted to speak. Not only in this hour of doubt I may say so. They are not idle, but they were not made as weapons of war or conquest. That is not their power. Those who made them did not desire strength or dominion or hoarded wealth, but understanding, making, and healing, to preserve all things unstained. These things the elves of Middle-earth have in some measure gained, though with sorrow. But all that has been wrought by those who wield the 3 will turn to their undoing, and their minds and hearts will become revealed to Sauron if he regains the 1. It would be better if the 3 had never been. That is his purpose." "But what would happen if the ruling ring were destroyed, as you counsel?" asked Gloin. "We know not for certain," answered Elrond sadly. "Some hope that the 3 rings, which Sauron has never touched, would then become free, and their rulers might heal the hurts of the world that he has wrought. But maybe when the 1 has gone, the 3 will fail, and many fair things will fade and be forgotten. That is my belief." "Yet all the elves are willing to endure this chance," said Glorfindel, "if by it the power of Sauron may be broken, and the fear of his dominion be taken away forever." "Thus we return once more to destroying the ring," said Eristor, "and yet we come no nearer. What strength have we for the finding of the fire in which it was made? That is the path of despair. Of folly, I would say, if the long wisdom of Elrond did not forbid me." "Despair or folly," said Gandalf. "It is not despair, for despair is only for those who see the end beyond all doubt. We do not. It is wisdom to recognize necessity when all other courses have been weighed, though as folly it may appear to those who cling to false hope. Well, let folly be our cloak, a veil before the eyes of the enemy, for he is very wise and weighs all things to a nicety in the scales of his malice. But the only measure that he knows is desire for power, and so he judges all hearts. Into his heart we thought it will not enter that any will refuse, that having the ring he may seek to destroy it. If we seek this, we shall put him out of reckoning." "At least for a while," said Elrond. "The road must be trod, but it will be very hard, and neither strength nor wisdom will carry us far upon it. This quest may be attempted by the weak with as much hope as the strong. Yet such is oft the course of deeds that move the wisdom of the world. Small hands do them because they must, while the eyes of the great are elsewhere." Very well, Master Elrond," said Bilbo suddenly. "Say no more. It is plain enough what you are pointing at. Bilbo the silly hobbit started this affair, and Bilbo had better finish it or himself. I was very comfortable here and getting on with my book. If you want to know, I am just writing an ending for it. I have thought of putting, and he lived happily ever afterwards the end of his days. It is a good ending, and none the worse for having been used before. Now I shall have to alter that. It does not look like coming true, and anyway there will evidently have to be several more chapters if I live to write them. It is a frightful nuisance. When ought I to start? Boromir looked in surprise at Bilbo, but the laughter died on his lips when he saw that all the others regarded the old hobbit with grave respect. Only Gloin smiled, but his smile came from old memories. "Of course, my dear Bilbo," said Gandalf. "If you had really started this affair, you might be expected to finish it. But you know well enough now that starting is too great a claim for any, and that only a small part is played in great deeds by any hero. You need not bow, though the word was meant, and we do not doubt that under jest you are making a valiant offer, but one beyond your strength, Bilbo. You cannot take this thing back. It has passed on. If you need my advice any longer, I should say that your part is ended, unless as a recorder. Finish your book and leave the ending unaltered. There is still hope for it. But get ready to write a sequel when they come back." Bilbo laughed. "I've never known you to give me pleasant advice before," he said. "As all your unpleasant advice has been good, I wonder if this advice is not bad. Still, I don't suppose I have the strength or luck left to deal with the ring. It has grown, and I have not. But tell me, what do you mean by they?" The messengers who are sent with the ring." "Exactly, and who are they to be? That seems to me what this council has to decide, and all that it has to decide. Elves may thrive on speech alone, and dwarves endure great weariness, but I'm only an old hobbit, and I miss my meal at noon. Can't you think of some names now, or put it off until after dinner?" No one answered. The noon bell rang. Still no one spoke. Frodo glanced at all the faces, but they were not turned to him. All the council sat with downcast eyes, as if in deep thought. A great dread fell on him, as if he was awaiting the pronouncement of some doom that he had long foreseen and vainly hoped might after all never be spoken. An overwhelming longing to rest and remain at peace by Bilbo's side in Rivendell filled all his heart. At last, with an effort, he spoke, and wondered to hear his own words, as if some other will was using his small voice. "I will take the ring," he said, "though I do not know the way." Elrond raised his eyes and looked at him, and Frodo felt his heart pierced by the sudden keenness of the glance. "If I understand aright all that I have heard," he said, "I think that this task is appointed for you, Frodo, and that if you do not find a way, no one will. This is the hour of the Shire folk, when they rise from their quiet fields to shake the towers and councils of the great. Who of all the wise could have foreseen it? Or if they are wise, why should they expect to know it until the hour has struck? But it is a heavy burden, so heavy that none could lay it on another. I do not lay it on you, but if you take it freely, I will say that your choice is right, and through all the mighty elfin friends of old, Hador and Hurin and Turin and Beren himself were assembled together, your seat should be among them." "But you won't send him off alone, surely, master," cried Sam, unable to contain himself any longer, and jumping up from the corner where he had been quietly sitting on the floor. "No, indeed," said Elrond, turning toward him with a smile. "You at least shall go with him. It is hardly possible to separate you from him, even when he is summoned to a secret council and you are not." Sam sat down, blushing and muttering. "A nice pickle we have landed ourselves in, Mr. Frodo," he said, shaking his head. That is the end of our chapter. And I think that is where I'm going to end the stream. Thank you for getting rid of the trolled Wanagi Ska. It's been a while since I had one of those. So thank you all for joining. This book is very long and very heavy, but we will get through it. One would come right at the end. Yeah, I guess the trolls are just now waking up in some parts of the world. It's 8:45 a.m. No, it's 12:45 a.m. It's 12:45 a.m. Albo. So, the next stream, I don't know if I will continue on with Lord of the Rings or if I will read the Google translated version of Empress Teresa. I will probably do that one. Time zones. Time zones, what can I say? So, I will probably be streaming tomorrow because I have to take advantage of my vacation. I will not be streaming this late because Thursday I have to put gas in my car and see about getting it smogged. And I want to do that in the morning once my paycheck goes in. So, thank you, Wanagi. You know, I haven't read this book in like ages, and I was stupid, and I bought, instead of buying the books separate, I bought one book. I can speak. I bought one book that has all three of them in it from the Lord of the Rings, and yeah, it's really heavy, which is why I never read it. But now I can set it on a desk and read it without hurting my wrist. This thing's a weapon, I tell you, because it is really thick. I wonder how many pages it is total. Let's see. There's even like a cool map in the back. I should try to pick a picture of the map. Oh my god, there's a lot of maps. I had no idea that there were so many maps in this book. And an index. I thought this was just a cool book, but no. The maps. The alphabet. Dear God. I'll just stick to reading the story for now. Maybe I will try to take pictures of the maps and upload them. I'm sure I can probably find the maps online. We can follow the journey. Anyway, it is time for me to be heading off, so I will bid you all a good night, my friends. Thank you all for joining. I hope to see you tomorrow. And I'll decide then what I'm gonna read. Oh, that is awesome. I read The Hobbit when I was in I think 6th grade, maybe 5th grade. I'm still amazed that as small as the Hobbit book is, they made so damn many movies about it. Thank you, Wanagi. Good night, good morning, to whatever time of day it is for you, for everyone that joined, and thank you all, and we will do this again, hopefully, tomorrow. Take care, all. Bye.
Initiating goodnight sequence. Dispersing appropriate dosage of compound 347. Initiating phase 1 of memory calibration. This won't hurt a bit. Just close your eyes.